Hey there, Scott Groves here with Consolidated Coaching, doing one of my favorite relaxing activities, which is really just smoking a cigar and unwinding after an insane day of work. I'm with my buddy Mike Eaton, who's right off camera that unfortunately you can't see, but you'll hear him. And really, we just wanted to do some Q&A, talk a little bit about the introduction to my book, Lead Generate 61 Days to Double Your Pay. Maybe allow either the reader or the viewer, however you're consuming our information, a little bit of insight into kind of what's going on with me, how we came about writing this book. I don't know, kind of just my resume so that you know who you're learning from. So Scott Groves, Consolidated Coaching. I don't know, Mike, you've known me a long time, but actually don't know a lot about me professionally. So what should people know?
Yeah, let's see. So when did you start as a loan officer?
It's kind of a loaded question, actually. I started with Washington Mutual back in 2000, right after I got out of the Army. So I started as a loan officer shortly after getting right out of the Army. Started with Washington Mutual, was going to be a teller while I worked my way through college because they had this very cool program that if you worked at least 20 hours a week, you got full benefits as long as you were also a full-time college student. I was god-awful, horrendous at being a teller. Like every day I was out of balance, a few pennies, a few dollars, and apparently in the banking world that shit really matters. They really care about their money.
So weird.
Yeah, weird. So managers came to me and said, we know you're not ripping off the company. You're not trying to get rich $1 at a time, 57 cents at a time, but you just can't be a teller. You want to do mortgages. And so, this is 2001. Washington Mutual was kind of leading the charge in second mortgages. And although people knew what second mortgages were, and some people had home equity line of credits, this real aggressive marketing of tapping the equity in your house, which we can talk about later, whether that was a good thing or a bad thing, this real aggressive marketing of basically putting a second mortgage as a home equity line of credit, aka having a giant $50,000, $100,000, or $500,000 credit card secured against your house as equity. It was a little bit of a newer concept. I mean, they've been around for a long time, but not kind of in the mainstream. And so I was at a really small branch, actually a branch that was inside of a grocery store that just had a teller line. Yeah. And for 4 years, I just did an insane amount of second mortgages. It was kind of nonstop, getting the cross-training of Washington Mutual, which I will be forever blessed for because they used to want you to be able to open an IRA and open a safe deposit box and do a second mortgage and help somebody transfer their investments and handle their banking and handle their checking. And so what ended up happening is, even though I never finished college, I kind of got a very cool on-the-job training understanding of people's inner workings with their finances, their taxes. When you work on a teller line, you see everybody's tax liens come through and child support liens come through and challenges they're having with their finances and successes they're having with their finances and who makes money from having businesses and who makes money from just having regular paychecks. So it was kind of a very cool on-the-job education. But the reason I say that it's a loaded question is because from 2000 to 2009, I think I did 2 purchase loans. I think I maybe did loans where I needed to look at tax returns 3 or 4 different times because the reality was second mortgages up to $250,000. And then refinances, which I did almost primarily from 2004 to 2008. At the time, you needed no documentation. You needed a good credit score, show a few assets, and like it was off to the races. So when people say, how long have you been a loan officer? I generally say since 2000, but if we want to be real and talk about when did I become a real big boy loan officer and have to read tax returns and understand programs and, do the things associated with helping somebody qualify for a loan traditionally, I didn't start doing that till 2009. So 20 years into the career, but 10 years into this part of the journey.
So what do you think that what you learned in that first 10 years has informed the second 10 years?
That's a very good question. I think what happened was, if you decided you wanted to become a loan officer, I could teach you how to read tax returns in a crash course, a 50-hour crash course over a week. Like I could teach you the hard skills of being a loan officer, filling out the income worksheets, reading a credit report, analyzing the debt to income ratios. I could do that for you in a week. So that's really what I spent 2009, 2010 doing, kind of on the fly YouTube videos, doing my own taxes through TurboTax. I remember I finally had enough money to get my taxes done for me in like 2011, and the tax person must have hated me because I sat with them for like 10 hours asking questions, asking about this, asking about that. And so the hard skills you could learn very quickly, and that's what I had to do kind of on the fly in 2008, 2009. But how did that first 10 years serve me? I think more so than anything, it taught me how to talk to clients about their finances, and it taught me how to evaluate somebody's overall financial picture on their side, and then kind of looking at the bank at the people that made it and transitioned successfully, and the ones that were successful in the stated income days versus the ones that were successful after everything crashed and basically mortgages in California almost bankrupted the world economy. So yes and no. Did that first 10 years serve me at all on how we do loans today? Absolutely not. Like even reading a credit report is different. But did it serve me in how I talk to people and how I interact with our team and how I can talk to clients about, effectively what's going on in their broader financial picture? Absolutely. And that was very cool.
So if you were talking to someone who had just started as a self-sourced loan officer, I know you've got some guys in the office now that just came over to start doing that with y'all. Without them having to live through those 10 years of trying to figure it out and trying and failing and being a teller, what would you say are like the 3 biggest takeaways you got from before you transition into being a big boy loan officer?
Yeah, I like that, big boy loan officer. Actually being able to read tax returns, go figure. I would say for people that are starting new in the industry, like what 3 skills are good for them to have? The first thing I always ask people is, hey, what job did you have before you decided you want to come over to being a loan officer? And the reason I'm asking that question is it doesn't really matter necessarily what the answer is, or I'm not looking for people who specifically came from this industry or that industry, but I just want to discover that they worked somewhere where they were forced to interact with people, and their success was probably predicated on having either a high level of discipline or a high level of emotional intelligence. And it's kind of funny because, for example, Mike, if you wanted to become a loan officer, you are a comedian, you've done telemarketing sales in the past. And so although you're probably not the most disciplined person I know, understatement of the century, you definitely have the emotional intelligence to be able to talk to people, instill confidence. You have some of those soft skills. So that's something I would look for in a new loan officer. Or maybe somebody that's your polar opposite, but is coming out of the military and has that regimented, like, hey, I'm going to get up at 5:30 a.m. And even if I have to make more calls because I don't have as many of the soft skills, like I'll just put in the hours and make 3 hours of calls instead of maybe Mike or Scott would only have to make an hour of calls. And so I think the first thing I would look for is either a strong attachment to discipline or a high level of emotional intelligence where they can talk to clients. So that's the first thing I would ask about the person that's becoming a loan officer, and also help them decide, okay, hey man, you're gonna have to be the discipline guy 6 a.m. to 10 p.m. until you get things rolling and you learn to talk to people about their finances, or hey, you're the emotional intelligence guy, you're gonna be able to bring in some business. We gotta set up a system so that there's follow through and checkpoints so you can actually close that business and not just let people down. So that's step number 1.
So that would be then your one big takeaway is finding which of those areas you fit into. Yeah. That's what I'm hoping that the viewers can get out of this is, instead of going through 10 years of hardship, what are your takeaways? So number 1 takeaway, which category do you fall in? Are you emotional intelligent? Are you hyper disciplined?
Yeah.
What's the next thing they need to learn?
Yeah. So, moving in that, step number 1 being self-aware to step number 2, and whether it's the discipline side and you can just do it, or whether you're the emotional intelligence person and you've got to find a way to trick yourself into doing it. Obviously, the cornerstone of being a top producing salesperson in any industry, much less the mortgage business, is a daily commitment to lead generation. And everybody does that a little different. I think in the mortgage business, it's really making your hour of phone calls from 9:30-ish to 10:30-ish, having good follow through, putting your, kind of personal brand out there on social media. But the number 2 thing that I would say after becoming self-aware on your own style is will you actually commit to an hour a day of lead generation activity? Because if you won't, like if you know that that's the type of person you are, if the money or the success or the ability to help people buy a home, if that's not motivating to get you, if that's not motivating enough to get you to spend an hour a day lead generating, you got real problems. You're gonna wash out of the industry.
How long would you say someone should give themselves before they seriously consider stopping? Because I know a lot of times where I've been in cold sales jobs where it took 3 or 4 or sometimes 6 months to gain enough steam to where I wasn't just poor. So I had to generate those leads and I had to have them follow through and they had to mature through a process. So if there's someone out there and they're struggling and they're like, well, maybe is this really for me? How long do they give themselves before they quit?
Great question. It's one of my favorite questions because there's different levels of success. There's different levels of success in the mortgage industry, and there's what different people consider being successful. So how long should people commit to the activities or this career before they basically give up? That's kind of the question of the day. And the simple answer is a year. The tough answer is, I wish I would have wrote the book, 61 days, lead generate, 61 days to double your pay. And then maybe I'll make the follow-up book, 360 days, just fucking commit.
Yeah.
Because the reality is this commitment to lead generation and the activities that make a successful loan officer. In so many new loan officer, it ebbs and flows. They work in their business, lead generating, talking, reaching out to their sphere. They get a couple loans, and then they spend 3 months trying to close those loans. And then they're confused why at the end of that process, they don't have any new loans. It's like, well, because you stopped working on your business and you stopped doing the activities that you need to do to get to get the loans. So let me step back. Hold on. Let me restate that. People spend, when they first get started, because they don't have any loans yet, they spend a lot of time working on their business. That's what I meant to say. They're out doing the coffee appointments, they're doing the lead generation activities, they're reaching out to their sphere, and then they get a couple loans, and that's when they get sucked into the fray of working in their business. They're processing the loans, they're babysitting the loans, because that's the only loan they have to get to the closing line to pay them a commission. And then what ends up happening is that loan closes and they have no more loans, because no shit, you didn't do any of the lead generation activity to work on your business. So what I would say is the simple answer to a hard question is, from the day that somebody commits to the fact that, hey, I'm going to lead generate every single day, they give it a year. And that's what I've told several people. And it breaks my heart when I see somebody get to 6, 7, 8 months in, they're getting a couple loans, they're discouraged because this is a tough job, Somebody that you meet today for coffee who's a referral source is going to give you a couple leads. Those are going to turn into pre-approvals. Those are going to go under contract and then fall out of contract and then get back into contract. Then they're going to close the deal 30 days later. Then you're going to get your paycheck, because most of us are W-2 employees. Then you're going to get your paycheck 30 days later. So the frustrating thing is, for a new guy, the activity you do today is not going to put money in your pocket until 4, 5, or 6 months from now. And so if they don't get to that 1 year window, they're giving up way too soon. Now, that's the frustrating part when you're new in the business. The beautiful thing when you're kind of mature in the business and you've got loans rolling every month is like, I'm making money. I'm making money right now on stuff I did 6 months ago, and I know I'm basically setting up an annuity because the activities I'm doing today are going to put money in my pocket 6 months, 12 months, 18 months from now, because I'm building new referral relationships. So if people can get past that 1 year push, either by working on a team under some other top producers, maybe finding a company that gives them a very small draw for 6 to 12 months, or just grinding and accepting that they're going to have to work several hours a day on their business doing the lead generation, then in their business closing the couple loans they have. If somebody can commit to that, within a year, this can be a very rewarding profession.
So would you say that that's part of why you made that Kaizen card? Just to remind yourself of those?
Yeah. So for those of you that don't know, Kaizen is a Japanese business term. I think it was popularized by Toyota. And the concept of Kaizen is that you just work to get incrementally better every day. So, there's that theory of like, well, if you get 1% better every single day, it doesn't feel like a lot. But over the course of a year, you'll just be exponentially better. I challenge anybody to do a push-up today, and then 2 push-ups tomorrow, and 3 push-ups the next day, even if you're completely unfit, you're going to be able to do 100 push-ups by the end of the year. So yeah, that Kaizen card that we have with Consolidated Coaching gives you a couple guiding questions on how to run your business, gives you some tips on how to grow your business, and then most importantly, gives you the follow-up plan for what to do after every coffee appointment or meeting with a potential referral source. And yeah, you're right, man. If you can spend a year in this industry reading books like mine, learning from some other great coaches out there, of which there are some, and there are some that are snake oil salesmen. If you can do that and commit to your craft and really just go gung-ho for a year, you should be able to make it. And then, if for some reason you don't, talk to a trusted advisor, talk to a manager, talk to a coworker, and just, evaluate whether or not this business is really for you.
When did you know this business was for you? What was the first time that you thought, I can do this?
Yeah. So, when I knew that being a loan officer was probably for me and that I knew I could be a good salesperson, sales provider, lead generator, whatever, is, man, I hate to sound so melodramatic, but it's crazy how over a course of 20 years, these crazy stories kind of codify in your mind. But I remember about a year into doing second mortgages, so we're probably around 2001, 2002, I had a manager who, she just wasn't a good leader. She was pretty batshit crazy. And she would come in and start her day after everybody had been in the branch for a half an hour, and just unload on everybody. And I mean, every possible thing you can think of that you were doing wrong, from where the teller line stanchions were, to how this was organized, to where were we at with our numbers. And it was so demotivating because everybody had already been there working, half hour, an hour before opening. We'd been working for an hour to basically get the day set up correctly. The business day had started. Clients were coming in. We were all doing our things. And then she would come in and just chop everybody down. It was a real lesson in how not to be a manager and how not to lead. And I remember one time she came in and called me into the office and started going on one of her tirades. And I just kind of subtly reached over her and pulled open one of the printer drawers on the printer and pulled out a piece of blank paper and started writing while she was still unloading on me. And she was so perplexed, she finally said, what in the hell are you doing? I'm like, oh, I'm writing my resignation. Obviously, I'm a piece of shit. I don't need to work here. You never have anything good to say. And I know I'm a pretty good salesperson, and I've learned a lot in the last year about being able to do second mortgages. I'm pretty sure I can get a job somewhere else. And I just kept writing, and she literally lost her mind and left the office and didn't come back for 2 days. And so I was very close with the assistant manager at the time, who I thought was a phenomenal leader and still is. She's actually still a friend of mine to this day. And we kind of just held down the branch for 2 days, and we originated a bunch of second mortgages, and things kind of just went on really smoothly. And I was like, yeah, I would prefer to work for great leaders, but even when I'm working for poor leaders and poor managers, I still know how to do this job. I can still meet my numbers. I can still, help people with loans. I can still close loans and open loans and start the process. And I was like, oh yeah, this is probably what I'm going to be doing for a long time. And I gave college another, year's chance after that. I stuck around for another year and did another 15 or 20 units at a local college. And then I was like, this is just what I'm going to be doing for the rest of my life. And getting a degree felt kind of worthless. Probably wish I would have finished it. But I dropped out of college, and it's just been all loans since then.
So then you know the job's for you, you're closing second mortgages, you're mastering refinance, and then suddenly, dun dun dun,
dun dun dun, Washington Mutual.
Crash.
Yeah, Washington Mutual shits the bed really bad. And, I should go back and try to find my employment records or my W-2s, because all of this there's about a 2-year period from the very end of 2007 when some smart people that I knew started saying the writing on the wall doesn't look so good for Washington Mutual. And then I was at Washington Mutual, I can't remember exactly how long, another 6 months to a year. I do remember I left Washington Mutual right before the real ugliness, where regulators came in on a Thursday night, and the next day, Friday morning, you were Chase Bank. And you were like, what? By the way, side note, great book if you're interested in the catastrophe of the mortgage industry. There's a great book called The Lost Bank, and it's all about Washington Mutual and the bad decisions they made. And there was no evil monopoly man sitting at the top twirling his mustache trying to bankrupt Washington Mutual and take all of his profits off the table. They just made incrementally bad decisions that kept getting worse. And it ended up, a lot of people think Washington Mutual went out of business because they wrote too many bad loans. That was definitely a part of it. But really what ended up happening is Washington Mutual had an old school run on the bank. They ended up being the poster boy for these option arm loans and the liar loans, as I think Hillary Clinton dubbed them in one of her speeches. And what happened was,
I'm with her, Scott.
I know you are. What happened was, and anybody interested in this stuff, it's a very fascinating book called The Lost Bank. What ended up happening was the FDIC at the time still had insurance per account at $100,000. And there's all kinds of ways you can set up your accounts and structure your accounts so you can actually have like $1 million in a bank and you have all kinds of protection in different layers of FDIC. They've since raised that, I think, to $250,000 or $500,000 per account. But there was just an old school run on the bank. There was so much negative news about Washington Mutual. I remember for months, old ladies coming in and being like, it's gonna be the Depression. I've got $1 million here at Washington Mutual. I've got to take out $900,000 because I'm only protected up to $100,000. Well, that wasn't exactly true, and there was ways around that. But yeah, Washington Mutual, they went out of business on an old run on the bank. So I think about 3 months prior to that, I had all of my Washington Mutual 401k, like I think I was well over $100,000. The entire 401k was self-directed by the company, which you could opt out of, but I'm like the stupid 22-year-old kid when I started Washington Mutual. What do I know? Banks don't go bankrupt. I don't know anything about financial planning. So 100% of my 401k was in WAMU stock. And then as WAMU stock started to drop from $40-something a share, and I saw my, whatever, somewhere north of $100,000 or $200,000 in 401k drop and drop and drop, you know, obviously the bank is telling us, hey, we're going to make it. Banks don't go out of business. We have FDIC insurance. Banks haven't failed since the 30s. So what did all of us do? We started putting our money in and doubling down on WAMU stock. So when it dropped to $30, a bunch of us in the branch and across the region bought more. Dropped to $20, $10, $5. We just kept plowing all of our money back into WAMU stock. They had something called the deferred comp plan. Our 401k was going into Washington Mutual stock. And finally, a mentor of mine, an older guy who had, you know, seen this movie before a few times in different crashes, he's like, dude, get your money out of there. That company is not going to be there. And I quit a few months beforehand, and I think I had maybe $17,000 in my 401k that I ended up cashing out and living off of for a few months when I tried to figure out what the fuck I was going to do. Really scary time, really shitty time. All the dates don't really line up in my mind exactly because it was just a whirlwind from the end of 2007 to say the middle of 2009. But I do remember, I wrote about in the book, it was, you know, fall of 2000 or spring of 2008. It was like the absolute low of the low of the low. You know, I was driving a Corvette I couldn't afford. I had a house that I was renting out rooms and staying on a buddy of mine's couch to try to not foreclose on the house. I wasn't making any money. Guidelines had been cut off. And I went to like Subway with my dad, and I wrote about this in the introduction to the book. I went to Subway with my dad, and we got 2 $5 footlongs, chips, and a drink. So like $16 worth of food. And I was like, sweet, Dad's going to buy dinner because I don't have any money. And when we were in line, after the sandwiches had been made, he was like, hey, I forgot my wallet at home. Can you pick this up? And I literally just walked out of the Subway like, I think I was crying. I was at least teary-eyed. And he was like, what the fuck, man? Like, I knew things were going rough, but like, what's going on? Like, and I'm like, Dad, like, maxed out credit cards, no money in my checking account. I literally do not have $16 to pay for Subway right now. Something had happened. Maybe this is right after I quit Washington Mutual, and like the money from my 401k that I lived off of for a few months was in transit, and I was just waiting on like that check to come in. It was horrific, man. And like, I never want to be back there again, which is ironic because I still don't do a great job of savings. I do significantly better, and my wife and family will always be provided for, but I'm still not great at savings. So I guess some lessons are harder to learn.
So during this time, you have no money, you can't buy Subway, you're trying to figure out what the fuck is going on. Are you still doing an hour of lead generation a day?
No, I had given up on everything. Like, because all of my lead generation when I was at Washington Mutual was through the bank. Like, we weren't allowed to take databases home, or, you know, even at the time, the idea of saving client information on your cell phone when you worked at the bank was kind of silly because it's like, well, I work for a bank. I'm just going to use their CRM. Banks don't fail. I've been here for 8 years. Like, I'm never leaving Washington Mutual. So, I probably did loans for hundreds, if not thousands of people who, you know, had I appropriately databased all those people and had their cell phones and email addresses for the last 5 years, even if some of those people lost properties or had to declare bankruptcy, the economy comes back, people's credit is repaired. I'd probably be retired had I databased or kept on a spreadsheet, legally, at least like name and phone number, name of email, and all those people. Because I had hundreds of relationships of clients who loved me and were able to get second mortgages to buy additional investment properties, send their kids to college, get into homes, and they weren't one of the 10% that defaulted or walked away from their home. So they saw their equity grow over time, and I just really screwed that up. So I wasn't lead generating. I wasn't doing anything. I was sitting around trying to figure out, do I use my VA or do I use my GI Bill from the Army, because I was coming up on 10 years where you have to use the GI Bill in the first 10 years that you exit the military. I was thinking, do I take my GI Bill and go learn to be an underwater welder? I was like really close to sending in the packet for underwater scuba diving welding school in Florida, because I heard that paid like $100,000 a year, and I liked scuba diving. I was this close to taking a middle manager job at IKEA, because my dad had a friend who was like a big, department head at IKEA. I was really spinning out of control.
So
drinking too much, gambling too much, stealing from Peter to pay Paul to get some cash to go play poker. And if I'd lose, I'd just put it on a credit card. And if I'd win, I'd, pay my living expenses. I was a fucking mess, dude.
Yeah. So I feel like there's probably, you don't have to have a 2008 to get there. So like, I'm sure there's a lot of people out there right now. Like, I think one of the most powerful and profound things I've ever heard is, if you are going into the hospital and you have a broken leg and you're getting wheeled back to get that broken leg reset, and you see a guy get wheeled by you and he's had his leg amputated, that's much, much worse than your situation.
Right.
But it doesn't make your broken leg hurt any less. So, you might be talking to these people about a situation where you had both your legs cut off, but that's not making their situation right now. If they feel too broke to lead generate, if they're worried about where their next deal is coming from or their next meal is coming from, what's the next step?
I've never met anybody too broke to not find a way to pay their cell phone bill. So I hear this all the time. People are like, oh, I can't afford $89 a month for coaching, or, I can't afford to do this, or I don't have the money or the resources to do that. Well, you're fucking talking to me on Facebook or instant messenger or text message. You found enough money to pay your cell phone bill. And if you have a phone and you have a voice and you have a product, that's really all you need. Now, look, am I very excited that I have business partners where I can spend more time lead generation? Yes. Am I stoked that I make the kind of money that I can make where I can enjoy cigars and whiskey and lead generate here in the cigar bar where I end up getting a couple loans a year? Absolutely. Like, is that more fun? Yes. But if you found a way to pay your cell phone bill this month and you have a product to sell or a loan that you can write, you have to lead generate. You just have to. And it's exponential returns. So after you lead generate all month long and you find a loan, then you'll have a little bit of money to pay your cell phone and send out some flyers. And then you'll close 2 loans, and then you'll have some money to send out some flyers and have your cell phone and host an open house. And then at the open house, it just is exponential, and you have to reinvest in yourself, and you have to make the initial investment in yourself if you need to get some coaching or need to do something.
After the crash, when was the first time you did lead generation? Like, what did it look like getting remotivated?
So just in case this video ever is part of my archive, I got to give a huge thank you, shout out, forever gracious, and have a ton of just gratitude for Eugene Ridnour and Kirk Giroux. And at the time, Eugene Ridnour was a realtor who I didn't know that well, but was pretty successful. And he was marrying a friend of mine from high school who I didn't even really know her that well. We know each other pretty well in high school. Several years had elapsed. We kind of reconnected. I think we happened to reconnect on like Facebook, and I happened to hang out with her and this guy Eugene when they first started dating. And so they were getting married, and I'm sure I was one of the fringe invites, like, well, he was there when we met. I guess we got to invite him, and we're having this destination wedding in Belize. There's no chance he's going to come, and so at that point, I took my last couple $1,000 I went on this destination wedding to Belize. I'm like, well, I'm going to go scuba diving in Belize. I'm going to live it up. I'm going to drink it up for a week. And then I'm going to come back and I'm going to start that underwater welding job, or I'm going to go back to college, declare bankruptcy, live with my parents, whatever the fuck the plan was going to be. I'm like, but this Belize trip is going to be my last hurrah. And so I was there for Eugene's wedding, successful realtor, bunch of other successful realtors at the wedding. And most importantly, the manager of the real estate firm where Eugene worked, Kirk Giroux, was there. Kirk and I really hit it off. We were the only two single guys at the wedding. I was straight, he was gay, so we were single looking for different things. And we just had great conversation that whole week about life, relationships. He's about 20 years older than me, 25 years older than me. And he was just kind of that Yoda that I needed at that moment in time. And he said, hey, I'm a manager of this real estate office. Obviously, things aren't going nearly as well as they have been the last 5 years. But if you work inside of a real estate office and you really focus on lead generation, somebody's going to be buying or selling a house every month, because people move, people get divorced, people get promoted. And at the end of the day, even when the economy is in the gutter, there's a big cross-section of people who have money. And frankly, those people are the smart people you want to be working with, because they're buying houses when houses are cheap. And so not even a story worth telling, but I weaseled my way into getting hired as the in-house lender at this real estate company. And for 2.5 years straight, and this is not an exaggeration, 2.5 years straight, other than I think one weekend that I took away from the office with my ex-wife, I worked every single day. And it was rare that I was not the first person in that office in the morning, and I wasn't the last person that left, which was tough because in an office of 40 realtors, we had a couple morning people that got in there at 6:30 a.m., 7 a.m., and we had a few vampires that didn't start working until 9 p.m. at night. So for a couple years straight, I just was in that office every day, getting in front of realtors, overdosing on caffeine because I couldn't afford to take people to lunch. So I would take them to, coffee or iced tea. I remember I would get an iced tea. The realtor would usually get a large coffee, and it was $6.70 or something at Coffee Bean in Los Feliz. And I just did that for 2 years, lead generating. Every time a realtor was walking out the door to go see an open house, I'd ask if I could go with them, because that was my opportunity to meet another realtor who was listing the property for sale. Then I would get back to the office, I would cold call them, and I would just lead generate like a machine, basically doing the follow through and the structured hours that I knew how to work from the bank. And then adding on just this junky hustle, because I didn't know where my next deal was going to come from, and I was broke and I wanted to get married. So that was kind of the rebirth of my career. And then at the same time, I'm watching YouTube videos, trying to figure out what private mortgage insurance is, and trying to figure out how to calculate upfront FHA mortgage insurance, because I had never done any of that shit. I had done all, low documentation refinances and second mortgages. And it was nuts, man. It was just trial by fire. And I'm really, really thankful that a bunch of the relationships I made in those 2 years, I'm still doing business with them today, almost 10 years later.
So you said something I think that is important to hit on. You said that you were able to do that. You had a junkie hustle because you didn't know where your next meal was going to come from. But the second part is you wanted to get married.
Yep.
So you had an external why. Yep. So that kept you at the office those late hours.
By the way, also what ruined my marriage, so there's that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think it's worth pointing on. But so if you were to look, you have the convenience of hindsight right now. You can look back and you can find these dots in your life of the people that made your success now possible. Mm-hmm. So do you think that there are loan officers out there right now that are in the middle of their struggle that can find those dots?
Absolutely. I would say a couple things that kept me afloat was I did have at the time a great girlfriend who turned into my wife, and she is just a phenomenal human being. She's one of those people who you're like, man, I really wish this girl could marry my brother, or I hope she finds happiness. At the end of the day, we didn't need to be married. We weren't the right fit for each other, but during those struggling times, she was very supportive, and I will always be grateful for her for that. And so if there are loan officers who are struggling, I would say connecting the dots and making sure, this is going to be really hard to say, but making sure you're taking care of the other parts of your life. And I know how hard it is when you're like literally struggling for the next deal, and maybe your bank account is negative, or you just haven't got to that place where you know where your next deal is coming from, so you don't know where your next paycheck is coming from. You still have to take care of your health. You still have to take care of your wealth and save a little bit of money on the side, because no matter where you are in your career, it can get worse if you're in sales. You have to take care of the people that are important to you, whether that's your spouse or your family or your friends or whatnot. Like, I'm a fan of getting out of balance for those short periods of time, or maybe even those short seasons where you've really got to focus on a solution. You know, like I wanted to write my book, so it was like all in on the book. Didn't spend a lot of time with my family that month. Ignored other aspects of my life. But at the same time, I knew that writing that book and completing that book would create revenue for the rest of my life for my family. It's residual income. So I was willing to make that sacrifice. But had the book taken me a year, I wouldn't expect my wife to put up with that, or my business partner, or my friends who like didn't see me for a month. Like, you can't do that for a year. If you're in that struggle and you're a loan officer and you're trying to connect the dots, I would recommend getting some type of coaching. And look, would I love for everybody to sign up for our monthly coaching program and pay me some money because I know we're adding way more value than the money is worth? Absolutely. But you can literally get a book for, on PDF for $1, or you can buy my book on Amazon for $16, or you can buy secondhand books for $4 on Amazon. You can get so much coaching and great knowledge for such a low cost. You got to be a little selective on what you consume for free on YouTube, because there are a lot of snake oil salesmen out there, and you got to be careful what you consume on YouTube for free, because there's a lot of snake oil salesmen out there in the personal development and the business development, especially in the mortgage world. But there's just so much good knowledge out there. So if you're trying to connect those dots, find a mentor, take care of yourself, take care of the other aspects of your life, and then just work hard. Like, it does blow my mind how many people's actions do not match their stated goals. When somebody tells me they want to make $100,000 or $200,000 or $500,000, and I see them roll in at 11 a.m. and leave at 3 p.m. and not really committed, and it takes them 2 or 3 days to respond to an email that their manager sends them, I can only imagine what feedback that gives to their referral partners and their clients. Like, come on, man. This is a job. This is a profession. So, take care of all those other aspects of your life. Find a coach and commit to putting in a lot of hours, because this job's fucking hard.
So there's the concept of the way that bamboo grows. When you plant bamboo, you have to water it for a really, really long time. And you'll spend about 30 weeks with a seed underground, watering it, nurturing it. And then over the next 2 weeks after that 30 weeks of incubation, the bamboo will grow 20 feet. So it'll go from a seed that you've nurtured forever, and then it'll finally sprout and grow huge. So following the crash, you're doing these activities, you're planting the bamboo, and you're waiting for it to sprout. What was the first sign of growth?
Wow, I like that bamboo analogy. I'm going to steal that. I think the first sign of growth is the first time I got a deal from somebody who didn't work at the real estate office that I was planted in. So, I wish I could remember who it was. I don't want to make it up. I think it might have been at somebody down the street at a competing brokerage who I met at an open house, went to coffee with, did the follow-up, did the system, made the call, stayed in front of him, and then he gave me a deal. And that was the first point of growth, because it's like, okay, cool. Well, these people that work in this office, I'm the in-house lender. They can use me if they want to, or they can choose not to use me, but they have to see me. Like, I'm just in their face every day. They don't have a choice. And again, they didn't have to work with me. I had to earn every relationship and every piece of business I got out of that office, but they had to see me. Like, I got in front of them at the office meetings. I was constantly asking them out for coffee. I was just, doing laps around the building. Hi, Tom. Hi, Bill. Hi, Holly. They had to see me. But the first time I got a deal, probably about a year into this kind of, rebirth of my career, from somebody outside the office who's like, Scott, I really like you. You're always coming to my open houses. You're doing good shit. Yeah, I'm going to give you a shot. Here's a client I want you to call and pre-approve them. That was like a huge fist pump win. Like, yeah, okay, this is working. This is where we start to see this explosive bamboo growth. Mm-hmm. Good question, by the way, and great bamboo analogy. I'm going to have to look that up.
I want to hear about how you celebrate your successes. Like, what do you do? One, to thank yourself, and two, to thank your referral partners. Like, even to this day, because that's a big part of keeping that momentum going. Is, there's a reason they give out trophies when you win a race.
Right.
Like, you want to know that you won the race. So what kind of trophies do you give yourself?
So I think the underlying question, which is really good, is like, this is an ongoing daily struggle. How do we celebrate the wins? And the sad thing is we don't celebrate the wins enough. You know, the downs, the upside of having unlimited income opportunity is you have unlimited income opportunity. The downside of having unlimited income opportunity, because you're in a fully commissioned job, is you have unlimited income opportunity. So you never feel like you get there, right? And I've heard this from people that have grown from making $50,000 to $100,000, and I've heard this from people that have grown from making $100,000 to $1 million. When you're in a salary job and you're like, oh, there's the next raise, or there's the management job, or there's the pinnacle, because I wanted to be the COO of this company, and when I got there, I was going to make $370,000, and that was success. The problem is when you're fully commissioned, you know you could have always worked a little bit harder and made a little bit more money. So, you know, I'm embarrassed to say that I don't celebrate the wins as much as I should. And I probably don't do enough for the other people in my life. You know, my wife is a saint. Thankfully, with, you know, date nights and what her love language is and how she likes to be loved, it's very easy for me to kind of take that for granted and have, quality time with her and recharge her batteries. And then I can go back to 4 or 5 days of working 15 hours a day. And that's something I got to change because we have 2 little kids now who I need to be spending more quality time with. With our referral partners, you know, I know a lot of people that do a lot of crazy stuff and awards dinners, and, you know, they're basically breaking laws by taking people out every time they get a deal with them, and they're doing crazy stuff. Or the really egregious examples are there's a bunch of assholes in our industry that are still delivering, you know, brown envelopes with cash to realtors that they're closing deals with, and that's just basically unforgivable and 100% illegal. But I have found that with our best referral sources, a genuine thank you goes a long way. Like calling Mark and saying, hey, Mark, I just want you to know I don't take these referrals for granted. It's how I feed my family, and I appreciate you. I respect you as a professional. I love working with you. And once in a while, I just got to call and remind you that I really appreciate that we have a little bit of this one-way relationship where I count on you for leads, and, you know, you count on me to close deals. But I know there's a lot of good lenders out there that can close deals, and there's not a lot of great realtors who I want to be working with. So celebrating the wins with our realtor partners and our referral partners, financial planners, insurance people, it's really been, you know, trying to refer back a deal to them when we can, but more importantly, just giving them a genuine thank you, you know, a handwritten thank you card. Because how often do any of us get like a genuine thank you anymore? So I think that's happening. But you bring up a good point, man. Like, I got to spend more time celebrating the wins. I will tell you, like, smoking cigars and unwinding a couple times a week and being like, yeah, we did it. We closed that deal. We figured out that tough transaction. We had a great month. There's something therapeutic and meditative about having a cigar, having good conversation with a friend, having, you know, a glass of liquor to celebrate a win. And, you know, that's kind of how I celebrate right now.
Mm-hmm. What is your favorite part of this job?
By far, like, there's not even a close second. By far, the best part of this job is our team and our office has grown to a level now where I get to pick and choose who we work with. You know, I get to hire the loan officer assistants and the processors who we want to work with on a daily basis, in and out. I've built great business partnerships with business partners who I respect. Thankfully, knock on wood, we have enough business and we do enough consistent lead generation that we can kind of cherry pick the good referral sources that we want to work with and kind of let the difficult people fall by the wayside, which I couldn't do that definitely couldn't do it 10 years ago, probably couldn't even do it 5 years ago. But now we're at a point in our business where we have enough of a system of lead generation, and we're generating enough new leads and relationships that I can afford to have a relationship with somebody who's just not a model match for me to do business with fall by the wayside. So far and away, the best part of this job is the people we work with and seeing other people's success and, taking somebody from a $12 an hour personal assistant / dog walker / somebody who was out getting dry cleaning to like this individual that I'm thinking of specifically is going to make $80,000 or $100,000 this year in a support role where she works her ass off. That's exciting. That's the fun stuff. And then I would say a fairly distant second is getting clients into homes. I shouldn't take that for granted because a lot of what we do does help first-time home buyers create wealth. And for some of them, it helps them create generational wealth where they're then using the equity in their house to buy their kids a house, send their kids to college, buy an investment property. That probably would have been my by far number one 5 years ago. But as our team has gotten bigger and other members of our team were having the closer relationships with those clients, and they're nurturing those relationships a little bit more than I am, now the number one is just the people we work with because they're great.
What's your favorite deal you've ever closed?
The favorite deal I ever closed was for my friend Jessica, because Jessica, going back in time, callback as you like to say in the comedic world, Jessica, who was a good friend of mine and was that assistant manager at Washington Mutual, who I was talking about, who we were down in the mud with when we had that manager who was god-awful. Jessica decided after her first couple kids to leave the banking industry, and the deal she had worked out with her husband is like, hey, I'm going to work my ass off in the banking industry for the first 6, 7, 8 years of our relationship. You're going to get through college. You're going to get through law school. You're going to get through UCLA. And then after we transition and you're making good money as a lawyer, I'm going to quit this banking racket because getting yelled at all day by people who overdraft their account is not fun. And so shortly after she left the banking world and he entered the law profession, they wanted to move from their condo to a home because they had, I think they had just had their third kid. He was a lawyer, wanted to live a little bit closer to where his office was, and they wanted to buy like potentially the forever home. And it was a really tricky deal because it was probably 2012, 2013, so regulation was still kind of against us. Property values were rising, but they had just taken a huge 20, 30, 40% hit like 4 years before. So, there was just all these moving pieces. The condo that they were leaving, they were going to rent out to a family member, which they did. That family member actually still lives there. They were buying a new house with a low down payment. The primary wage earner had just left her career. The new primary wage earner had just started his career. There's so many moving pieces, and it was not an easy deal. And I'm sure at times in the transaction, they were frustrated with me and I was frustrated with them. But we got it closed, and now, this person, and I think this is important, that this person that bought a house, the person that bought the condo on stated income, and let's be real, was one of the 85 or 90% who bought a home with a liar loan, with stated income, with everything that we have come to villainize, did the right thing. They made all their payments. They pulled some cash out of that condo because they had some equity. They bought their next home, which that home is now up in value a couple $100,000. So by being able to get that evil liar loan back in 2005, they've built generational wealth. They used some of that equity to buy the next house. They used the equity in that house to pay off his student loans. And now they're setting themselves up for when their kids are ready to go to college, they're going to sell either the condo or sell the house and move back into the condo so that they have a couple $100,000 of free money to send their 3 kids to college. And it will be, dad's a lawyer, but for the mom, it will be the first people in her entire family to go to college. So by being able to pull off these loans, it's like you create wealth, you got them close to their job, he can spend more time with his family, they're creating wealth, they're going to send their 3 daughters who are lovely to college. It's just like, it's a win-win-win. And that's the stuff that loan officers do that I don't think we get enough credit for. Because without a highly intelligent, world-class loan officer, to do that activity back in not only 2005, but then going forward in 2012, like that wealth just doesn't exist. They don't get that home. So that's pretty cool.
Yeah, that's really cool. So What do you do? What do you? I know you harp on it's important to invest 10% of your income into yourself. Um, what have been over your career the best investments in coaching you've made?
So, what have been the best investments in coaching that I've made? The first coach that I hired was a gentleman named Todd Duncan. He's still in the mortgage industry, very polished, very good material. You know, my only criticism of him, and I would tell him this if he was sitting here, is that he hasn't done loans in 25 years. He's written a ton of great sales books. He has a wonderful personal brand. He puts together one of the marquee mortgage events in the mortgage space, and everybody that goes to it can learn a lot. You know, my only dig against him is that he's not doing loans currently in this world that we live in now, but that doesn't mean you can't learn a lot from him. He was the first coach that I worked with, and he really helped me understand this idea of hiring ahead of demand. And what he told me, and mind you, this was in 2013 as things were just starting to rebound. I was starting to make good money. You know, he told me, he's like, hey, you got to hire ahead of demand. You got to hire this. You got to do that. And I just didn't really see the vision. And I was coming from a little bit of a scarcity mindset instead of an abundance mindset. And he said, think about it this way, Scott. Would you ever pay somebody $120 an hour, because we figured out how much money I wanted to make and how many hours I was working. And so he said, would you ever pay somebody $120 an hour to go shop for you at Target? And I was like, no, that's insane, because somebody will go do my shopping at Target for $15 an hour. And he goes, exactly. He goes, that's the key. If you can do the lead generation activity and the revenue generating activity that'll make you $120 an hour, why in God's green earth are you still doing some of these $15 an hour activities? He's like, so everything you can in your personal life and your professional life that's a $15 an hour activity, hire somebody who's going to be happy to make $15 an hour and start laying off those activities to them. You know, you leave early to go take your dog out for a walk, send a dog walker to your house. You know, you find yourself as, I think I was maybe single or divorced at that time, I don't remember exactly. You know, you find yourself spending a weekend running errands and pay somebody to be your shopper. He's like, you find yourself spending an hour a night separating tax returns, because this is still when we were getting most of them physically, and pulling out staples and photocopying returns and labeling PDFs. Find somebody who would do that for $15 an hour. And the key is, don't spend that time then screwing around and going on Facebook and having water cooler talk around the office. Spend that time lead generating, learning your craft, consuming the coaching, reading a book, doing the revenue generating activities. And that has really stuck in my head to where, you know, every time I've given up money to hire somebody new, within 6 months it's paid off and created more revenue for me on the whole. So that's probably the first great bit of coaching that I got. And then, you know, shameless plug and shout out to my friends, Hal Elrod, John Vroman, and John Berghoff. They run several mastermind groups, the Best Year Ever annual conference down in San Diego. They run really phenomenal coaching, training masterminds that's not just for mortgage individual, but brings together people from a myriad of different industries to just, you know, share best practices. And ironically, well, not ironically, thankfully, that's how we met. So.
It's crazy. So what drives you to want to provide more value than you charge with coaching?
You know, the problem with being a really good salesperson is we are easily sold. So I have bought endless amounts of $9 products, $900 products, $2,000 CRMs, $3,000 masterminds, $500 special trips. You know, I'm the sucker. Like, if you have something to sell, find me, because good salespeople are easy to sell. And so, you know, I think I've spent enough money on stuff that I decided was not worthwhile, that I'm just very fearful of anybody ever saying, like, I paid $100 a month, or I did private coaching with Scott for $1,000, or I spent $10,000 to be part of his mastermind group, or whatever, and I didn't get the value that I paid out of it. So part of it comes from a place of fear. Part of it comes from a place of abundance, you know, something I learned very much from Hal Elrod of like, hey, just put your best stuff out there, charge what you think is fair, add tons and tons and more and more and more and more value, and that will just bring in the masses to consume your product. And then part of it, and I'm going to be honest, is I don't have to make all my money from coaching. If the book sells 50 copies next month and I make a couple $100 to supplement my car payment, great. If it catches fire on a podcast and sells 5,000 copies and now I've got 20 grand to put into an investment account for my retirement or the dream second home I want to have down in Cabo, that's great too. But, I think there's a lot of coaches who either depend 100% on the coaching revenue or the live event revenues, or frankly, there's a lot of coaches that are getting into the mortgage coaching space because they've gotten their mortgage license suspended, they've gotten in trouble, they have pending lawsuits, and they have to make 100% of their money off of coaching. And so they're constantly worried about this balance of, am I charging enough? Am I making enough? What's the minimal viable product that I can deliver for this money? Or they're just running a pure scam where they're trying to get, $199 per person and scale it to the point where they make enough money and they can disappear. But, for me, I'm still doing very, very well, originating loans, lead generating for our team. I've got 2 great partners that help, close the actual loans we're working on. So I've given up a little bit of revenue on the loan side and partnered up with great people. We pay our staff very well so that it frees up time to work on the coaching business, because that's kind of where more of my passion is going. But I don't have to make my money off of the coaching clients. That's bonus. And I think people should pay for coaching, because if not, they don't take it seriously. But yeah, I force myself all the time to deliver more value. And my business partner, Justin, has kind of coined this phrase, intellectual philanthropist. Like, if I've got something that's interesting that might help somebody, I can't help but want to share it with other people. And, the sad thing is I should probably charge for that a lot more often than I do, but I don't. So, that's where that all comes from.
All right, so let's walk through a scenario. I got my NMLS. I've been working in a call center for about a year. And now I've just switched over, and I am just starting to close loans on my own for the first time. I'm, lead generating, and I'm not seeing a lot of results. I'm marketing. I'm doing all these things that my managers are telling me to do, but I'm just closing 1 loan a month. How is my $89 that represents a good chunk of my income going to get me closing a second loan a month?
That's a great question. So, the scenario is, you're either new to the industry, you're transitioning from being a bank loan officer, you're transitioning from being a call center loan officer, you're in a new geographical area, and you're eking out 1 loan a month. Something has to change, but do I want to spend that entry-level cost? And by the way, that $89 is going up to $129 soon. So do I want to spend somewhere around $100 to get some coaching from somebody who I don't really know from Adam? I would say for that loan officer who's struggling to do that 1 loan a month, if they're doing at least 1 loan a month and they're doing those lead generation activities, don't get discouraged and keep doing them. So the first thing is, and I'll steal a line from my buddy Mike Merriam, you're probably closer than you think. Like, you're probably right there. If you're doing the activities, you're at least staying afloat, closing a loan a month. It's probably just a couple tweaks that you need on your presentation, or the manner of which you're going about your coffee appointments, or your post-closing follow-up, or your in-transaction follow-up. There's probably just a couple tweaks that you need to make to get to 3 deals a month. And then once you get to 3 deals a month, you now have a captive audience of 6 producers to market to, because you have 3 buyer's agents and you have 3 listing agents. So I have found it's very hard for people to get from 0 to 1 and 1 to 3. If they follow our system and they get to 3, then you see exponential growth to 3. Then all of a sudden it's like, well, now I'm at 10 loans a month, and I've got to figure out a whole new game, which is, how do I hire people? How do I build a team? How do I be a mini manager? So the reason people should invest some money in coaching with me, or there's other good coaches out there. Call me if you want a recommendation. If you don't like, my beard or the color of my hair or the content, I'll give you a recommendation to somebody else. Somebody should invest in that entry-level coaching, because they're probably just one little tweak away, one little light bulb, a light bulb over their head away from really taking it to the next level. And the problem is that light bulb, that switch, is different for every person. So that's why in our program we have a daily 8:30 a.m. Pacific Standard Time lead generation call for 10 minutes. And it's not because I want to commit to having to lock myself into doing something every day for the rest of my life. It's not because I'm giving earth-shattering, amazing lead generation value or techniques in that 10 minutes every single day. But what I have found for the people that consistently log in every day, 2 days out of the week, completely worthless for them. If we could cherry pick which ones were going to be worthless, they could just avoid those 2 calls. One of them is going to be mildly engaging. One of them is going to be completely contrary to what they're doing and they're rolling their eyes. But one of them, there's going to be just enough of this nugget of information where that switch is going to flick. It's going to flip. Sorry, that switch is going to flip, and they're going to be like, oh man, yeah, that's what I need to be doing. So for example, there's a competing coaching program that says you have to do a happy hour every month. You have to do a happy hour every month. You have to do a happy hour every month. And I think of a older, more mature loan officer. She's a lady up in Idaho. A majority of her referral sources are from the Mormon community. So not exactly your target demographic to have a happy hour with. They're not drinking. They tend to have, demographically larger families that they want to get home to at the end of the day. And so she kind of just ignored that and put it out of her mind. And she texted me one time. She's like, Scott, you don't even know you said it. But this morning on your call, you said, as a throwaway line, if you can't host a happy hour because whatever, you have a special needs kid you have to go home to at the end of every night and you just can't be away one night a month, throw a lunch, have a pancake breakfast, start a sewing circle. I made some just off the cuff comment and it clicked in her mind of holy shit. Every professional I know drops off their kid before 7:30 or 8. Most realtors don't roll into the office in my neighborhood until about 9 or 9:30. That means I have this golden hour window where I could do a pancake breakfast or an ongoing breakfast mastermind and really make a difference. Sure enough, she started that. It's now 3 or 4 years later, and she's gone from averaging 3 loans a month to 16 loans a month. I looked her up just a couple weeks ago because she just made that one little tweak in her business. And again, it was a throwaway line on a 10-minute morning call that probably the other 100 people on the call did not use that as an implementation into how they do their business. But for her, it was career changing. And so that's why I think our program is worth the investment because are you gonna use all the material? Of course not. It's like drinking through a fire hose. But you're gonna get a couple droplets that are like, oh yeah, that's gonna change my business and change my life.
More for personal satisfaction than anything, I would love to hear you play devil's advocate to lead generation. So if you had to argue to me why lead generation is not, what would be your objections? Scott, I'm lead generating, it's not doing anything.
The first thing I would ask is how you're lead generating. So you mean kind of our system of making an hour a day of phone calls, reaching out to roughly 30% buyers, 40% existing referral relationships, and 30% new referral relationships. What you're probably arguing is like, I'm successful and I don't make my hour of calls a day, or I don't want to make my hour of calls a day, or just argue why you don't have to do it.
Yeah, the reason I'm asking this is because there are plenty of people out there that have found shortcuts or whatever way, and they're accidentally successful.
Yep.
So they're doing better than they think they are, and their stability is false. So they're going to argue and say, I don't need to lead generate. I have my leads. I have a full pipeline. I'm keeping my pipeline full.
Yeah. The best way I can describe this, and we'll get back to the lenders in a minute, but we'll talk about this phenomenon with realtors. So realtors tend to have this career arc. They get into the business, and these are the ones that make it and the ones that are successful, not the ones that wash out. They get into the business, they get in touch with every single person they know and let them know they're a realtor, and they close a couple deals for friends or family. And then if they're good ones, those transactions go well, and those friends or family refer more people, and those people refer more people. And so the cycle goes kind of like this. The first couple years, those realtors are hungry. They're working every Sunday at an open house. They'll drive across town for a buyer who wants to see a $100,000 condo in the ghetto. Like, they don't care. They are hungry. They are lead generating. They're Facebook messaging. They're texting. They're reaching out to everybody that went to Delta sorority with them and letting them know they're a realtor in the area. They're really hustling. Okay. Then after a couple years, they close basically a huge cross-section of people who become first-time buyers or early investors, or they're buying lower-cost property. Then there's about a 3-year period where those realtors are on fire. because they're still getting some of those buyers from their hustle. And that first wave of buyers that were first-time buyers are now having kids, getting married, getting divorced. They're selling their house and upgrading, downgrading, moving across town. So now they've got their, hustle buyers. Now they're getting all these listings from the people that they helped buy houses, and they're helping those people buy incrementally more expensive houses. And you'll see realtors go from like poverty, I made 50 grand, I made 75 grand, I made 100 grand, I made 500 grand, I made 600 grand, I made 700 grand. But guess what happens? Many of those realtors don't build a big team. They don't bring on a buyer's agent. They don't bring on an operations manager. They're just like, well, I'm doing it all. I deserve all this success and all this money. They stop doing their lead generation. They stop doing their hustle for new buyers. They won't drive across town. They start getting a little chip on their shoulder and say, well, I'm a listing agent only. I make all my money doing listings because that's where the money are. They start talking disparagingly about buyers. Buyers are liars. I don't want to deal with them. They don't want to get pre-approved. Lenders drop the ball. Every time I have a listing, the market is good. The listing is selling. It's guaranteed cha-ching, money in my pocket. And I've seen this over and over and over in my 20 years of my career. People that used to be a really big deal in a neighborhood and every other street had one of their signs as a listing agent, they're gone. They're dead. Like maybe they saved and made enough money to retire. God bless them. But what probably happened is over this 7 or 8 year career arc, they went from the hustle, the lead generation, got away from it. And if they don't find a new way to pivot and find new business or turn those listings into other listings and lead generate for more listings, they're, I don't want to say a one-hit wonder because this can happen over the course of 7 or 10 years, but they make all of their money or a vast majority of that money in that middle 3 years. And then a year or two later, they're finding out like, oh my God, I raised my living expenses to thinking that I was always going to make $500,000 a year, but I didn't maintain that hustle and that discipline of lead generation. And now the market is shifted, or I lost my buyers, or I lost my hustle. And like, I don't know how I'm going to pay my taxes this year. It's a real danger. And so I would just apply that analogy to loan officers. If you hit the ground running, or you had a deep social network, or you found a Facebook funnel that worked, or you were working at a bank and you had a lot of walk-in referrals, great, take advantage of that. And those are the people that I see arguing with me like, I don't need to make my calls. I get plenty of leads from here. I get plenty of leads from my BNI group, or from Facebook funnels, or from SEO advertisement on Google, or my cousin, my uncle, and my best fraternity brother are all financial planners. They're going to keep me fed for my entire career. I get tons of leads for them. Guess what, man? People leave the business. People slow down. Facebook changes their algorithm. Click ads, pay-per-click on Google goes from 47 cents for the word mortgage to $240 for the word mortgage, and now it's no longer profitable. Like, shit changes, man. And so if I was arguing against lead generation, it would usually be because, well, I've got this thing that's working. All right, cool, man. We'll exploit that thing that's working and work the hell out of it, but also realize that that number one referral source who gave you, 20 deals this year, next year she might be on maternity leave. This happened to a good friend of ours actually out in the desert. Their number one referral source went to jail for something unrelated. Invested in a startup and a property thing that ended up being this pyramid scam, and like he lost his license. He ain't giving them referrals anymore. I mean, crazy shit happens in this business. And so those people, playing devil's advocate, I can picture the people that have told me like, hey man, I don't need to make my calls. I do this, I do that. I've got this deep social network. I've got that. All right, well, throw a divorce in the mix. Let me know how many referrals you get from your ex-in-laws who used to own that big company that could give you a bunch of referrals. Like, shit just changes. So I think we've constantly got to be lead generating to navigate the storm that's coming of change, because we know change is the only thing that doesn't change. Change is always coming. So I tried, but I just can't argue against it.
Yeah. I think lead generation is recession-proof. So tried and true. If you were going to describe the motivation you get from Karina, Gabe, and Alina, how would you describe that?
So, if I was going to describe the motivation that I get from my wife and my kids, I'd probably have to go back to this idea that I think motivation is bullshit. I never wake up in the morning and say, man, I cannot wait to make 10 calls today so I can get 8 yeses. No, I take that back. I don't wake up this morning thinking like, I want to make 10 lead generation calls today so I can get 8 no's and get 2 yeses to turn that into a coffee appointment. And of those 10 coffee appointments, 3 of them will cancel. And of the 7 that show up, 4 of them will give me a lead. 2 of those will be good leads. 1 of those will close a deal, and 1 of them will become a referral partner. Like, I don't wake up saying like, yes, rejection. So I think motivation is bullshit. But I'm committed to doing the activities because commitment is always going to overtake motivation. And if you're committed to doing something, just by starting to do the activity, you get that kind of centricular force. You get that momentum where all of a sudden now the task becomes easier because you're committed to doing it. Now you're doing it. Well, now you might as well just do it, and then you do it, and then the momentum takes over. So I believe in momentum more than motivation. And if we were to have my wife here and give her some truth serum, like, I think my wife would very, very much relish in the idea of like, she comes from a very humble family. You know, there's probably been months where we've made more in a month between her and I than her family or my family, you know, growing up made in a year. And so my wife would legitimately be okay with like, hey, we're going to make $40,000 a year and we're going to live in the back bedroom at my parents' house, but we're going to be right on top of each other and we're going to spend a lot of time with the family and you're going to see the kids 10 hours a day. Like, I legitimately think she would be fine with that. Like, no more Lululemon workout clothes, you know, no membership to the gym. Oh, who cares? We'll go hiking, you know, no more steak dinners. All right, cool. We'll be like, we'll just go to Chipotle. You know, no adding to the retirement funds every month. Like, it'll be okay. We'll probably be working till the day we die anyway. Like, I really think she would be okay with that. So to say that I get some deep level of motivation from like, well, you know, we have these dreams of sending our kids to $30,000 a year private school, or I really want to provide for Karina so she can have all the things she's ever wanted. That doesn't really come into my head on a daily basis. But what I am committed to is I really do, and this might get political or aspirational or kind of, you know, sappy and nostalgic, but I really do have that kind of like bootstrapping conservative mindset of like, the next generation is going to have it better than the last generation. And I am really, really committed to my kids having the opportunity, maybe not the outcome, maybe they end up being lazy little bastards, I don't know, but I am really committed to the idea that they're going to have the opportunity to do better. So if Gabriel decides he wants to go to Harvard because that's his dream, and the only thing that would prevent him from doing that is money, I don't want to not have that money to do it for him. Or if Alina at 18 or 28 or 80, long after I'm gone, is motivated to like open a business, and the only thing from preventing her from doing that is like she doesn't have a year's worth of money to live off of while she pursues this dream to start this business, I want to be able to give her that money to do that. Or my son Jonathan, who's 17, if he's like, hey, I don't really know what I want to do, I don't want to be a deadbeat, but I kind of want to find myself and just go travel for 6 months. Like, I'm committed to allowing them to have more opportunities than maybe what I had or maybe what my wife Karina had. And so it's weird because I think when people talk about motivation, they're like, well, what do you want to buy them? Or how much money do you want to have? Or there's not this number where like, well, once I get $2 million in my retirement account, I'm done. I'm motivated to get there. It's like, no, I'm just kind of committed to the outcome of my kids having a better chance and better opportunity than I have. And that extends to the people on our staff. Like, I'm committed to the people on our staff making more money than they ever thought possible. And then I want a second home in Cabo. Like, I love Cabo. I love surfing. I love tacos. I love beer. I love cigars. I love hanging out on the beach with my wife. I like partying with my boys. Like, I just love Cabo. So I'm committed to having a second home there one day. So that's kind of it in a nutshell.
Hell yeah. was hoping that the beginning of that answer was going to go differently. My sneaky ploy was that you could edit that out and it'd be a really sweet video you could give to Karina. I was like, so what about Karina and Gabe and Alina motivation? Well, honestly, motivation's bullshit. Like,
Yeah.
oh, cool, yeah, she'll love this.
Yeah, make sure you don't edit this part out because my wife will love to see that. It's like, my wife's a saint. I love her to death. I love my kids to death, obviously. My oldest son, Jonathan, who's 17, I didn't meet him. I didn't even know that he existed until 16 years old. So we're creating a very different relationship. I'm going straight from diapers to like trying to give life advice to my son, who's like, well, Dad, it's a little tough because my friend Debbie's sleeping around and I think my friend Billy's like addicted to heroin. And I'm like, wow, we totally missed the whole learn to read thing.
Yeah.
Went straight from Gabriel, learning how to not shit his pants to like trying to counsel my son on how to, still be there and be supportive of his heroin using buddy. Don't know that his name's Billy, so maybe we should edit that out. But now that I've given the disclaimer, we don't have to. But yeah, it's really weird. Like I'm committed to those things I just told you, but I'm also self-aware of the fact that I'm a pretty selfish person. I'm a pretty ego-driven person, and like I'm probably kind of addicted to work. Like I like working. I like spending my weekends, yes, having quality time with the family and doing right by them, but also coming in to work with you and figuring out ploys to build a better video service or a better video series so we can provide a better service at a lower cost than what the competition is. Like I like building the better, faster mousetrap of how to do loans. Like I'm kind of addicted to work. So, I mean, if I was going to pick a motivation, maybe it's like this idea of like work for the sake of work is kind of fun. And that sounds insane, but it's really my reality.
Yeah. What's a question you wish people would ask you?
First of all, this is the greatest question. Who did we steal this from?
John Vroman.
John Vroman. John Vroman, a buddy of ours who runs a great podcast. He's an amazing public speaker. He always asks people on his podcast, what's a question that you wish people would ask you? If you want a killer question to ask people, ask that question because it's so great. A question that I wish people would ask me is like, oh, when are you going to stop doing all this craziness? And the simple answer is I'm not. But if there was another question that I wish people would ask me, I wish people would ask me more about the team that we work with. Consolidated coaching would not exist without Chris DeRosa. Chris DeRosa is the younger brother of my best friend since kindergarten. He needed a job. I had this crazy idea of growing a coaching program, and he was literally willing to come in, trial by fire. He worked in the services industry and the hotel industry, had a little bit of, technology background, had some chops on a Mac, and literally just came in and said, oh, you need somebody to figure out how to edit video? Okay, I'll watch endless YouTube videos and figure that out. Oh, you need somebody to build a website where people can pay for shit? Okay, I'll figure that out. Oh, you got to archive stuff behind a password? I'll figure that out. And it hasn't been perfect, and we've both been mad at each other a million times. But he's worked really hard over the last 4 years to make sure that this coaching program exists. On the other side of the equation of my loan business, I can name countless number of people who have worked with us, have worked for me, who currently work with us. And I'm the one that doesn't mind getting on social media and putting my name out there, and I'm the one that doesn't mind making the cold calls and getting up in front of big crowds. So I get a lot of credit for, frankly, the knowledge and the architecture and the technical aspects of the job that we do in the loan industry. That's almost 100% done by my business partner Justin. And our right-hand man right now, Arash, who I think is going to be with us forever, he's doing most of the client interaction and the instilling confidence and the talking to people on a daily basis to make sure these loans close. I wish people would ask me more questions about them. And then, the people that have worked for me before, all the way from the ones that sadly I don't talk to anymore, I've had relationships fall out, or the ones that have left and I'm still friends with and they're doing great in the mortgage industry, or the people like Natalie that have been with me for 5 or 6 years and started as that personal assistant and has worked herself all the way up to like a rock star loan officer associate who knows tax returns better than most loan officers I've ever met. Like, I wish people would ask more questions about them because they're the engine behind like the shiny exterior that I get to be, and I'm not even that shiny or polished or good looking, but I've just kind of picked that course where I'm out there writing the books, doing the social media stuff, doing the speaking engagements, and that's fun, and that's what gets me up in the morning. But there's so many people, dozens of people behind the scenes that make this all happen. We've got a bunch of quality improvements, sales funnels, coaching platforms, video delivery systems that are coming out simply because you decided to move out to California and help me out, while you're also pursuing the job of being a comedian. I hooked up with this top-notch film crew from Philadelphia. I live in the epicenter of cameramen, cinematographers, and wannabe directors, but I've never really connected with any of them on a level where I trusted stroking a check to any of them for $20,000 to make a top-notch video series, and somehow through some crazy occurrence, a friend of somebody I trust introduces me to this film crew in Philadelphia, and all the stars just align to have these people work super hard behind the scenes for us to make sure that we're putting out top-notch video content. And I wish people asked more questions about all of the other people in the transaction who make it happen. I mean, I can remember Marilyn, Mary Lou, Jeremiah. These are people that were funders at companies I worked for. They have the most thankless fucking job in the mortgage industry. They get the package when it's ready to go to docs, all the hard work has been done, and then they're under the gun to get those loan documents out as fast as possible to make the client and the escrow company and the realtors happy. Nobody ever says thank you. Nobody ever knows what they do for a living. But without them working at a very high level, my job sucks because the docs go out late and all the work that we did up to that point is for naught because all people remember is like, well, the loan documents got out late. And I wish people asked more questions about them and their importance and how much they add to the system and how much value they add to these transactions and these programs.
What's your greatest challenge today in your business?
My greatest challenge right now in the business and in life is not feeling guilty. It's that balance of when I'm working on coaching stuff, don't feel guilty about the amount of energy I'm putting into the loan origination business, because I know in my heart of hearts I'm doing a lot of the activities that are revenue generating activities that my other team members don't like to do. Making the cold calls, doing the lead generation activities. So I know that consciously, but subconsciously I feel guilty. And then when I'm with my family, I feel guilty about not working. And when I'm working, I feel guilty about not being with my family. So just constantly working on the mindset of like, when I'm here, I'm present, I'm doing this interview, I'm talking to you, we're building out the business, I'm relaxing, I'm enjoying time with a quality friend. Don't feel guilty about all the other stuff I'm not doing. And then likewise, when I'm at home with my family, turn off the cell phone, make that quality present time for them, and know that, yeah, maybe I even have a reason to feel guilty. Like if I'm phone off, fully engaged with my family all day Saturday, I'm probably missing a phone call that could turn into a loan, that could turn into revenue for the other people on my team. And I just have to accept that's the way it is. There's only so many hours in the day. And we're constantly trying to refine our systems and our, workflows and our team so that we don't miss those deals. But the biggest challenge right now is being somewhere and not feeling guilty about being elsewhere. For some reason, the only time I don't feel guilty is when I'm in the movies with my wife. That seems to be my escape from reality, where my wife is next to me. I feel like we're spending some quality time together because we really enjoy going to the movies together. The phone's off, so it's not beeping and tweeting and buzzing at me. The movie is a perfect escape for like 2 hours. I don't have to think about any of this other bullshit. So yeah, it's weird that the only time I don't feel guilty is probably when I'm doing the thing that's the biggest time waster, which is watching movies. A lot of people ask me why I wrote the book. Why'd you write the book? Why'd you write the book? I wrote the book kind of for three reasons. One, I had been kind of journaling, getting speeches or podcasts or coaching calls that I had given transcribed. I had kind of had a couple false starts on starting and stopping writing a few chapters. So at some point, I had some god-awful 400,000, 500,000 words on a Google Doc. And for some context, your average business book is like 30,000 words. So I effectively had content for like 10 books on this page. And at some point, my ego just took over, and I was like, this is ridiculous. Like, write the damn book. Like, you're better than this. You need to, you just need to do it. I mean, you're just better than this. You have all this content. Buckle down and get it done. So ego was kind of number one in this idea of completion and finality. Number two, a lot of people that are in that mastermind community with Hal Elrod where we met, a lot of them told me that, like, hey, even if you write the book and nobody reads it, which I'm, even if you write the book and nobody reads it, I'm really proud to announce that many people have read it. The book serves as a very expensive business card because nobody's ever going to throw away a book. Everybody throws away your business card. But if you can print a paperback copy of your book for $5 and give that $5 book away as effectively your business card, like, I'm the expert in this subject, you know, come work with me as a realtor, or come work with me as a loan officer, or hire me to speak at your event. Having a book is just it's the best business card, it's the best calling card you can have. And so having a book has really created other revenue generating activities of, yes, selling the book, but also getting in front of, you know, paid keynote speech opportunities, adds validity to the coaching program. There's a lot of good peripheral revenue generating activities that occur by having a book. And then number three, I wrote it to solve my own number one problem of, I have shiny object syndrome like you wouldn't believe. You know, like I said, a salesperson is the easiest person to sell. So if I was just on Facebook all day, I would be buying ClickFunnels and Facebook ads and pop-up this and clickbait that, and I'd be doing all this stuff. And I know in my heart of hearts, most of my revenue comes from buckling down, doing the calls, making the contacts, setting up the coffee appointments, one-on-one meetings that lead to deeper relationships, that lead to more referrals. I know that. So I wrote the book kind of to solve my own ADD, shiny object syndrome, and just be like, come on, dude, if you wrote the book and you can't even follow the stuff in your book, you're really a piece of shit. So just having the book and having the call tracker that comes as part of our coaching program and doing the activities, it forces me to buckle down and do the things I know I need to do. And then what's really cool is I also know it's all the stuff that all of our coaching clients need to be doing. And so the book serves as that bridge to, I'm going to do it. I'm going to lead by example. I have the playbook to hand out to somebody else to say, you need to do it. Now they have the playbook, they can do it. And hopefully it'll be this virtuous cycle where more and more people make more and more money based on, one, the concepts in the book, but also just the consistency of, like, every day doing a little bit, Kaizen, getting a little bit better, reading the book, doing the stuff. So that's why I wrote it.
All right, so scenario. 2008 has happened again. Dun dun dun. Everything's crashed. You have to start over from scratch, essentially. You know, this time you're a little better off because you had some savings in the bank. So let's assume you're not completely poor, but you have to start off. Now I know you're going to want to answer and say, "Oh, I just do my coaching," but, like, talk me through it. You are walking in tomorrow. It's Monday. The whole thing is fucking crashed. 8:30, you're on the lead gen call. 8:40, what's next?
All right, so let's say tomorrow the market crashes. You know, there's significantly less loans out there than there was 24 hours ago. There's significantly less buyers. There's significantly less transactions. The first thing is I will be grateful for the fact that I do have at least a year of emergency savings to live off of. You know, it's the same thing I tell people. It's the same thing that I tell people when they come into the business, like, you've got to give this a shot for a year. So for me, I would have to come to the grips of, like, okay, we've got to slash all expenses. I've got to probably liquidate some stocks before they crash, or take some cash value out of a life insurance policy that I've been saving in. And I've got to have, like, my war chest of money to live off of so that I don't have the extra stress of, where's my next paycheck coming from? Is my family going to eat? Am I going to pay rent? Okay, so I take that, whatever number it is, $70,000, $80,000, set it aside and be like, okay, I've got to live off of that. I've got to get my expenses way down so that there's the lowest possible level of stress for the next year. That's kind of step number one. Step number two, a lot of people aren't going to want to hear, but I think the next crash for loan officers might not come in the form of the market crashes and there's less transactions. It might come in the sense of, hey, Facebook mortgage or Google mortgage or Amazon mortgage is a real thing. they turned on the switch last night, and now 50% of the mortgages in the country are going to go to Amazon Mortgage because everybody who has a Prime account gets a free appraisal, all their closing costs paid for, and they get white glove service because Amazon's the fucking machine. So I would really evaluate, do I stay in the mortgage business? I know that I can go lead generate in any field and make the phone ring and sell a product. So if something world changing like Amazon Mortgage flipping the switch and the writing is on the wall that they're going to capture 50% of the deals in the market, I would really spend some time evaluating whether or not staying in the mortgage business is right for me. Now, I would stay in, and I would stay in for this very reason, and it's all part of the master plan. I would stay in the mortgage business because our team has built our volume to the point where we have enough deals that even a 50% cut to the available deals in our pipeline, we're still going to make a good living. If you're doing 2 deals a year and you're eking out an $80,000 or $100,000 a year living, and then overnight either the economy or Amazon Mortgage or regulation or something takes away 50% of the deals in your pipeline, you ain't sticking around this business to close 1 deal a month with limited upside and only make $40,000 or $50,000. So the first thing I would do is make sure my financial house is in order. Second thing is I would evaluate, do I want to stay in the mortgage industry? Third thing I would evaluate is like, okay, yes, I'm going to stay in the mortgage industry, but we've strategically built ourselves to the point where we're going to go from 20 deals a month to 10 deals a month. Me, Justin, Arash, our team, we're going to have to eat on a lot fewer deals and a lot lower amount of revenue or a lot less revenue. But all of those people that were doing 2 deals a month that are now doing 1 deal a month, they're going to wash out of the industry in the next 6 months. So at 8:40, instead of scheduling an hour to lead generate, I would really schedule 2 hours or 3 hours or 4 hours to lead generate. Because I know all of those loan officers that are getting the fringe deals, they're falling out of the business in the next 6 months. They're not going to make it. I want to pick up all those relationships and all those realtors. It's kind of like that. I'm going to get this quote wrong, so, whatever. Take the context, but don't quote me verbatim. It's that Martin Luther King thing where he said, like, I normally pray 2 hours a day. Today I have a really challenging decision to make, so I'm going to pray 4 hours a day. Because he just knew that when the going got tough, he needed to spend more time with his spirituality and in thought and talking to God and the things that were important to him. So I would say, what the lead generation call would become is like, hey, motherfuckers, no more 1 hour a day, 10 calls a day. Now we're stepping it up to 3 hours a day, 30 calls a day. And if you can't do that, you will 100% be out of the business in 6 months. So sink or swim time, Skippy. So that's what I would do. I would double down on the efforts. And then kind of the last thing I would do, this kind of goes back to the first thing of getting your financial house in order, is I would look at this new market, this new reality, the economy has crashed or Amazon Mortgage flipped on the switch. And I would say, okay, where am I spending money? Where am I spending time? What relationships do I have that aren't worthwhile anymore? What can I cut off on spending? What can I cancel out of my schedule? Sadly, what referral sources aren't going to make it? Like, we kind of know in our heart of hearts what people are like, yeah, we really like them. They're good for a couple deals a year, but if the economy shifts, they're going to be back to selling cars or waiting tables or being a barista. You'd really have to triage where you spend your time and money. So it'd be kind of that 4-step process. And it sounds like a cop-out, but it's like evaluate, adjust, and then double efforts.
Amazon Mortgage, where do you see the future of the lending world? What's next? Is it AI? Is it Amazon Mortgage? Is it Google? Does China play into this? Is there a trade war? Like, what's the future?
As we're sitting here in March of 2019, I think there are a couple things that are apparent. One, I don't think we're in a bubble per se, because over the last 10 years, the people that have bought homes, they have real skin in the game. They have real down payments. They were properly underwritten. They've presumably has some savings to weather the storm of a downturn in the economy or losing a job for 6 months. So I don't think we're in this big bubble. We're definitely not anywhere near 2007, 2008, 2009, where people were basically just playing with the house money, right? Like you were financing a house with no documentation, with no money down. You were riding the wave of appreciation. And it's kind of like if you could go to a casino and gamble with somebody else's money on a 100% line of credit that you don't have to pay back. And then you're like, well, I lost a little bit of money. All right, cool. I'm going to Starbucks. Casino, you got to eat these losses. So I don't think we're anywhere near that. But that being said, all financial markets, stocks, bonds, commodities, houses, they're all cyclical. And right now, I think it's pretty obvious we're much closer to a peak than we are, to a valley. I think the best time to buy a house was August 2011 when prices, basically cratered out, especially in Southern California. And I've got people that have been sitting on the fence since August of 2011 saying, I'm going to wait for the market to go down. I'm going to wait for the market to go down. Meanwhile, in certain neighborhoods, they've lost out on hundreds of thousands of dollars of appreciation. So where we're at in the market, who knows? But I think we're definitely closer to a high point in cost, even though affordability still looks good. Affordability is created from three different market forces. One is the actual raw price of the product. Houses are pretty expensive right now. But the other two items that go into affordability are cost to borrow funds, interest rates, still historically very low in the 4% range, and incomes. Like, what is the affordability? What can the average person afford to pay for a mortgage, a down payment, a rent, a commodity, whatever the case may be? And we could get real political and talk about how maybe the government, both parties, the government, has tried to inflate our way out of the recession that happened in 2009, and maybe the incomes that are being earned aren't really the real incomes that are supposed to be being earned, which are causing higher prices. But I don't want to go totally down that rabbit hole. But just know if you evaluate those three things, yes, property values are more expensive. Yes, interest rates have ticked up a little bit, but incomes have risen pretty much across the board. And anybody who doesn't believe that is looking at the political talking points instead of the actual data, because incomes have gone up. So as far as the affordability of a home, theoretically, they're still kind of affordable. Now, do we end up running out of a supply here in Southern California of people that can qualify for $1 million mortgage? Absolutely. So that's where I think the market is. As far as the industry, who the hell knows? Like, every day there's a new rumor about, Google's investing in this company, or AI is going to take over the world, or everybody's going to be consumer direct and get all their leads from Facebook, or this company's going to fail, or brokers is the only way to do business, or going back to a bank is the way to go. It's kind of like, who the hell knows? What I do think is going to happen, and I think this is becoming more and more apparent, is that our business is going to get turbo-taxed. And what I mean by that is 30, 40, 50, maybe 70% of clients out there will be able to do a TurboTax-esque type of mortgage. They can call a call center where somebody making $200 a file instead of $2,000 a file can kind of, be an application taker, get the bare paperwork in, automation, or, the streamline of paperwork aggregation, Rocket Mortgage, some of these brokers and third-party companies and tech companies that are doing some pretty unique stuff, they will be able to eat up a large portion of the market with maybe lower rates, maybe lower cost of delivery, maybe lower cost of loan officer commissions, or basically loan officers just become glorified processors. So I do think that's going to happen. I think 50% of the market will be served by this cross-section of loan officers or technological influences that are frankly a race to the bottom on cost, commission, rates, income for the loan officer side of the community. And that's basically what TurboTax did. TurboTax over the course of 10 years wiped out half of the revenue that used to go to CPAs, bookkeepers, tax preparers who were kind of picking off that low-lying fruit. Like if you have one W-2 and one pay stub and you take the standard deduction, you shouldn't probably be paying a CPA $1,000 to prepare your taxes. You should probably be paying $9.99 for TurboTax or whatever they charge. I think TurboTax is actually free now, and they charge you $10 to submit your state taxes. But that's definitely happening, and it's going to continue to happen. But the interesting thing is the really interesting thing is that the people that aren't just loan officers or application takers, the people that are actually the mortgage professionals, are going to end up just like the CPAs and the tax preparers who are currently still preparing taxes. They're working with the more affluent clients. They're working the people that have real tax strategy. They're working with the people that have the jankier scenarios. So I think, frankly, a lot of brokers, a lot of bank loan officers, a lot of people that work at call centers and mortgage companies that are more technologically driven, I think they're going to absolutely continue to butcher each other, be a race to the bottom, try to provide lower and lower and lower rates and compress margins because they're trying to pick up market share. And people like myself and my business partners who are doing the more intricate loans that have to work at a company that has a much wider product offering, I think those people are going to come out in a year or 5 years or 10 years as the more boutique loan officers that are serving that clientele that's got the more janky situation. They need access to alternate products. They have a tougher scenario to put together, or simply they need that more financial planner consultant version of a loan officer versus here's my W-2, get me a loan, pick one from column A and one from column B. So I think the future of the industry is anybody's best guess, and technology is going to play a big part in that. And we've seen Quicken over the last 10 years basically go from a very small call center, online lead aggregator to the biggest lender in America, which means they're the biggest lender / biggest driver of the economy in the world. If you think about it, America is still the biggest economy in the world. The housing industry is the biggest part of the U.S. economy, and Quicken, which is basically a company that nobody knew 10 years ago, is now the biggest player in the biggest sector, in the biggest country, in the biggest economy of the world. That's kind of crazy. And, a lot of people like to talk shit about Quicken and make fun of Rocket Mortgage, and some of that is fear-based, and some of it has been missteps by Quicken. But man, you got to really tip your hat to this company that turned into this behemoth, and by all accounts does business profitably and ethically. And they make missteps just like any other company does. But wow, just wow. That's something nobody could have seen 15 years ago. So for anybody to say, well, and we see this a lot right now, and I'm going to pick on brokers for a minute. We see this a lot from brokers right now who say, well, being a broker is the only way to do business. We provide this and this and this for our clients. And some of it is true and some of it is marketing. But for anybody in the mortgage industry right now to think that they have a monopoly on the truth is just insane. Because there's nobody 10 years ago or 15 years ago that would have said, yep, this little broker out of Chicago called Quicken, they're going to take down Wells Fargo as the #1 lender in the country by 2019. Insane. Nobody would have laid money on that. So, where is the business going? Who the hell knows? I just know that as long as I lead generate, as long as I continue to grow my product knowledge and surround myself with good people, there's going to be a job for me next year, and I'm pretty sure next decade. In the next decade.
Coaching ties into this?
And that's where the coaching ties in. Yeah, I want people to be able to be that professional, that mortgage professional who lead generates, grows their business to a size where when that big disruption does come in the economy and technology from Quicken, from Amazon, from the brokers, whatever, they're like, all right, cool, I'm not making as much money as I used to. I went from doing 8 loans a month to 5 loans a month, but that's a pretty good living for somebody that barely made it through high school. So that's what I think.
I think it's interesting to look at disruption and the way that we perceive it, because we look at big numbers and we forget to look into the microeconomics of it. So if you think about Uber and Lyft and how much they've disrupted taxis, you hardly ever see a taxi anywhere. When you walk down any of these streets, hardly see any taxis. There are still taxi drivers. There's still people out there that are making a good living as a taxi driver. They own their own taxi. So you can talk about Quicken and Amazon Mortgage and all that. There will still be individuals that are able to make a good living doing shit the way it is done right now, because adoption is a bell curve, and it takes so long to reach the tail end of that bell curve that it doesn't really matter what kind of disruption happens if you're doing the right things within your domain.
Right. Look, I can't remember what it was, 10 years, 12 years, 17 years ago. It was at some point in my career. I remember the big talking point is when DU and LP, which are the automated systems that run, automated underwriting decisions and basically create the loan map for whether or not we have an approvable loan or not. When that came out, there was going to be no underwriters left in 24 months. This technology was going to take over the job of an underwriter. It was going to change the face of the mortgage landscape. Regulation was going to decrease and blah, 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 blah. And then we went through 5 years of basically underwriters were completely insignificant because everything was stated income, stated assets. Like, what was there to underwrite? It was a rubber stamp. I mean, you could have given that stamp to some fifth grader and they would have been like, well, yeah, there has to be no income documents or no asset documents in the file. I guess it's approved, stamp. And now, 10 years later, 20 years later, however long it's been since DU and LP rolled out, there's more underwriters now than there was, 10, 15, or 20 years ago. So, the more things change, the more things they stay, the more things change, the more they stay the same. And yes, technology is going to change the industry. Yes, we have to be aware of it. But you see them, because you're in our Facebook groups, helping moderate the lending channels of our Facebook groups. There's so many people on social media that are wasting their time trying to guess and prognosticate about what the industry is going to look like next month, next year, next decade. They're leaving all the money on the table that they could be making right now. So, if I have a criticism of myself, it's that I've been one of the people that have helped fuel this endless checking in on Facebook because now it's kind of just become part of our industry and part of the way we think we need to market. I think most loan officers would be better served by getting the fuck off Facebook, not spending time in all these groups gossiping and prognosticating and trying to guess what the next big thing is and getting in arguments with people from other channels of business and go lead generate, go get some more deals, and then you'll have more money and you'll have more of a war chest to buy business and buy market share when the market does shift.
All right, so there's a loan officer in the business. They have found they fall into that one of those two buckets we talked about earlier. They're either really disciplined or really emotionally intelligent. The first guy that comes to you is the disciplined guy. Says, Scott, tomorrow's my first day at your company. What does my 9 to 5 look like? Walk me through that day.
Wow, really good question. So here we have somebody who's very disciplined. They're comfortable being regimented. They probably don't have any call reluctance. I always like to use the military example. Dude, if you were in Fallujah getting shot at, making cold calls should be laughable to you. So, that guy's very disciplined. I want him to start his day early. I want him to start with intention. I want him to journal and set up his day on a piece of paper, talking about what he's grateful for, the things that the industry can give him. He's got to jump on the coaching calls in the morning. He's got to go straight into an hour or two, actually probably 2 or 3 hours of lead generation because this guy has no relationships. He's got to spend a couple hours a day, midday, learning his craft, sitting behind a processor, sitting behind a loan officer assistant, sitting behind somebody senior to him or a top producer, and just learning the ins and outs of manipulating the system, looking at tax returns, carrying one from column A over to column B, all of the technical stuff. And then he's got to spend a third of his day out there hitting the streets, coffee appointments with realtors, going to open houses, going to mixers, and then he's got to go spend some quality time with, his family or friends and the stuff that he needs to do to recharge. And then he's probably going to spend an hour late in the evening databasing everybody, because if he's the disciplined guy and he's not the connector, the high emotional intelligence guy, the gregarious, personality, he's probably got to be more diligent than you or I might have to be at here's my database, here's my follow-up, here's my 12-touch system, because I'm going to have to talk to them a few more times than you or I would have to in order to make an impression and make something stick where I get that first lead. So that's the disciplined guy.
So the disciplined guy, just a quick recap of his day. So his day is start with intention. You should repeat this in the microphone. So
start with intention.
And then he's got...
get some coaching.
Lead gen call.
Yeah, lead gen call, get some coaching.
And then he's got 3 hours of lead gen.
3 hours of lead generation, phone calls, direct messaging on Instagram, Facebook Messenger, joining groups on Facebook where there's realtors, not lenders, trying to just get in front of as many people who could become referral sources as possible. He goes to coffee. He talks to the barista about her, a friend or family member might want to buy a house one day. Like he's just got to be disciplined and do that.
So that's 3 hours. And then he spends 3 hours learning the craft.
Yep.
So that looks 3 hours of
3 hours learning the craft, sitting behind the loan officer assistant, sitting behind the senior loan officer, learning from the manager, watching training videos, learning guidelines, going over income worksheets, looking at tax returns on deals that have closed, learning the 1003, learning the 1008, like just learning, fire hose of information right into the brain.
And then he finishes that, and then he does, a couple hours of personal recharge.
Personal face-to-face. He's got to be, his goal is to be, he's got to have, lunchtime to 4 p.m. or 2 p.m. to 5 p.m. or 3 p.m. to into the happy hour, getting in front of realtors nonstop. And then, do that recharge time, enjoy dinner, go to the gym, spend time with the family, whatever you've got to do that are your personal obligations. And then after the personal obligations, spend another hour recapping your day, setting up the next day, databasing, sending out handwritten thank you cards, that 12-step follow-up program for each time you meet a new referral source.
Okay, so that's discipline guy. Now walk me through that same day for emotional intelligence guy. It's Mr. Gregarious.
Mr. Gregarious also needs to start his day with intention, map out his day, lead generation call in the morning. And then instead of probably, just because he's going to relate to more people, he's going to be a little bit more confident on the phone, he's going to pick up on those social cues a little bit more, he probably only needs to do an hour to 2 hours of lead generation. And then he's probably got to be immediately out in the field, because that gregarious guy's probably going to get his energy from being around other people. So I would say for that gregarious person, like, you want to be out at lunch meeting new people every day. And then after you get that rush of social interaction and kind of being out away from the office, then come back to the office, and maybe it won't be 2 or 3 hours because maybe they just can't buckle down in that matter. Maybe it's only an hour or an hour and a half of education. Building rapport with the team, learning about the tax returns, things of that nature. Because what that person is going to find is they're probably going to be better and quicker to bring in the deals. So they've got to have the relationship with their manager, the senior loan officer, the processors, the loan officer assistants to be like, hey man, I got a deal, help me put it together. So they're going to be spending a little bit more catch-up time because they're probably going to get some deals in the pipeline quicker, and they're not going to have as much time to do the kind of structured learning up front. Whereas the discipline guy, yeah, he's going to get his at-bats, but he's probably not going to get them as quickly as the fun, gregarious guy. And then that gregarious guy, again, like, his whole goal for the afternoon hours should just be out meeting as many people as possible, doing some database follow-up, and maybe he only needs to have a 7-touch follow-up program. Maybe he just needs to close for the second coffee appointment, get some thank you cards in the mail, set people up on their drip campaign, because if they're the more outgoing, likable, social creature, they're probably gonna be a little bit more memorable than just the disciplinary, check the box guy. And so their approach is going to be a little bit different, but it's still a matter of lead generate, learn your craft, follow up with your appointments.
So what is something you were taught early on that no longer serves you in the mortgage industry?
So something I was taught early on that no longer serves me in the mortgage industry. Well, first of all, I learned how to do stated income loans. Those were pretty much worthless. Early on in the mortgage industry, I looked up to a lot of false prophets, and I won't name them by name because there's no reason to pull somebody's name through the mud. But I remember growing my career and seeing people who were either doing a ton of business or had a very high profile. And then what's crazy is through 20 years of this business and raising my profile and doing more and more volume in what I think has been a very strategic and ethical way, you start to meet some of these people and you start to work with people that used to work for them or with them or manage them. And, just be very careful what you wish for or the mentors you seek out or the people who you hold in high regard. Because sometimes when you peel back that layer, you find out a lot of stuff, And one of the guys I used to look up to in our industry based on my previous employer and how he was doing, because we worked at the same employer, we worked at the same company, then you come to find out that when the market crashed in 2009, that guy had to testify in front of Congress because of the amount of fraud that was going on in his branch and the amount of people that he put into homes that they couldn't afford. And you find out that people who you looked up to because of their financial or their production prowess is on their third marriage, and their kids hate them, and they have a drug problem, and they've got all these little gray area, quasi unethical side hustles going just to pay their bills. And so I would say something that I learned early on is that, you just look up to the guy who's the number one producer and you try to emulate everything that he does. And the problem is a lot of number one producers nationwide are not happy on the inside, or like I said, they're on their third marriage, or they lost 2/3 of the money that they earned in some type of pyramid scam or second divorce or child support or just something crazy. And I'm not talking about making mistakes. I'm not talking about making bad financial decisions. Just about everybody in the mortgage industry has done it. I pay child support for my 17-year-old that lives in New York, and I'm proud of that because I'm helping he and his mom have a better life and giving him more opportunity. I don't, begrudge anybody for making some bad financial decisions up to 2009 and past 2009. But living a life that's not worth living just because you want to be the top producer at all costs and you want to fund more loans and make more money at any cost, that's something I learned early on that is, I think, really dangerous. And to a certain extent, we even see it now. Like I said, you see coaches popping up on Instagram who are coaches because they lost their license or they're having, legal action taken against them, or their previous company sued them for millions of dollars because of the unethical way that they moved from company A to company B. So, something I earned very early on is just look up to the top producer and do everything that they do. That's not really the case. Whether you're just starting in this business, you're growing your business, or you're a top producer yourself, I think we have an obligation to peel back some layers of that onion and really evaluate the people we're looking up to, and then really evaluate the people that we're becoming. And look, I get it. It's real hard. It's real hard when you're doing a lot of business, and it's nearly impossible when you're doing a loan and you have to close that loan in order to feed your family. It's real hard to avoid the temptation of doing something illegal. And would I be lying if I told you I've never played in the gray area or talked to a client about how they need to write a letter of explanation? Absolutely not. There is some massaging and finessing that has to go on with every deal. But I do believe there's a difference between explaining to a client how they need to structure their finances and live their life and pay their bills in a manner that allows them to qualify for a loan versus committing outright fraud and helping them defraud the bank to get a loan. And so just, something I learned is that didn't serve me is looking up to the people that just happen to be the top producer. And now I'm very careful about who I look up to.
So who do you look up to now?
I'll tell you, I look up to a guy who doesn't even know I look up to him. His name's Joe Parisi, and if he ever happens to see this one day, I hope that he gives me a call, because Joe Parisi was a competitor of mine in a previous company called Prospect Mortgage. We competed for a lot of deals in the same market space. He's about 15 years ahead of me in my career. He now has his son working for him. And Joe, to the best of my knowledge, is a great family man, works with his son, has done all the right things, has saved money, has invested properly, runs a great, clean business. You never hear a bad thing about him or the way he runs his business. He's been a consistent top producer for 20 plus years. I mean, the guy just lives his values how he lives, and prints money in the mortgage industry. So, every once in a while, I'll check in on him based on either looking up his numbers or checking in with somebody who knows his son or checking in with somebody I know who he doesn't even know manages him or something like that. And, I always get good feedback, so I look up to him. I look up to my business partner, Justin, because we've had a very similar career arc, and he's still doing great things in this business. Again, ethically, has a great family, has saved a ton of money, is in a good spot financially. I look up to him. I look up to a friend of mine, Christy Solar, who, despite all of her physical challenges. She's had some serious health scares. Despite a pretty crazy upbringing, found a way to come into this industry and just, funds 200 units a year by really deeply caring about people. I look up to her. There's other people in the industry who I look up to, and I just try to surround myself with those people and spend as much time with them as possible. So maybe this cigar is making me realize I got to reach out and take Joe Parisi to lunch or something.
What's the weirdest loan situation you've ever been put in that you can disclose legally?
Wow.
It's really the weirdest one. Like, I know, like, Justin had that ad that y'all put out, like, if you have weird income, like you're a drug dealer.
Right.
Like, how do we get you a loan? Like, I know it's very tongue-in-cheek, but have you ever done any, like, real weird, crazy shit?
What's the weirdest stuff I've done? I've done a lot of loans for professional poker players, and trying to convince an underwriter that poker is different than gambling is very challenging. Because gambling income, the whole premise of underwriting is there the ability to repay? It's called ATR. Is there the ability to repay? And somebody who happens to go on a hot streak and has to put gambling winnings on your tax returns, because you do. So somebody goes on a hot streak and they win $200,000 on a slot machine, and then they win $300,000 playing blackjack. Well, theoretically, that's 2 years of consistent income that you might be able to argue that you should be able to use for qualifying income. But the point is that, gambling is just dumb luck. There is no consistency of gambling, and you can't prove an ability to repay a loan based on the fact that somebody just went on a hot streak and won a bunch of money on slot machines 2 years in a row. However, playing professional poker is a skill game where you can actually prove mathematically that somebody who's better at poker might lose an individual hand of poker, but over the long haul, they're going to make money. So, for example, I could play one-on-one basketball against Kobe Bryant right now, and I would have a 0% chance of winning a game. I would probably have a 0% chance of scoring a bucket. But I could go play a few hands of poker against the best poker player in the world, and I would probably win 30 or 40% of the hands that we play just by dumb luck and the distribution of the cards. However, over a lifetime, that poker is going to grind me into oblivion and take all my money, because he's going to win 55 or 60 or 65 or 70% of the hands over the lifetime of a poker playing career. So trying to explain that to an underwriter and say, no, this guy's legit. I've done a lot of loans for poker players, and that's always fun. The other thing that...
I met a couple of professional poker players recently. That are both professional poker players and comedians. And so, like, that's the weirdest life of all time. It's like, so what do you do for a living during the day? I play cards. Well, what do you do at night? I tell jokes. Like, so a lot of them will go and they will gamble at the casinos and then play a show at night. Because one was saying that, like, one of the biggest ways he makes money is loaning rich people at the table with him money. Because they'll come down, they'll sit down, they'll lose, their money right off the bat. Then I'll ask to borrow money. And so he'll loan it, like, yeah, I'll loan you 10 grand. I'm gonna take it right back. You loan me 10 grand, and I got my 10 grand. Like, but the easiest way he's been able to tell people that are never gonna pay him back is if they offer to pay with interest. Because that means they have no interest in paying that back.
It's pretty funny. That's pretty funny. I'll tell you one of the weirdest loans I ever did, and this was, there was nothing weird about the loan characteristics, it's just weird because of what an idiot I was. It was 2009, 2010, all the stated incomes had gone away, they flipped that switch off, and like I had to do real loans, right? And so I did my first FHA loan. Oh my gosh, this guy can buy a $600,000 house with 3.5% down. All I had to do was get his pay stub and his W-2s. Like, this is crazy. This is kind of like stated income, Like, I can read one pay stub and one W-2 and tax returns. I sent it all in. We got the loan documents out. He's at the loan table signing his loan. And for those loan officers watching the podcast or this video, they're going to know that all FHA loans come with mortgage insurance, meaning that there's an upfront premium that gets attached to the loan amount. And then there's a monthly reoccurring charge for mortgage insurance where that person's basically paying a premium due to the fact that they put low money down. And so I'm all proud. I did my loan. I'm going to close a $500,000 loan. I really needed that $500,000, $600,000 loan to close, however much it was. And he calls me. He's like, Scott, what's this mortgage insurance thing we never talked about? Like, you said just to trust you and sign all the preliminary paperwork. I I didn't really know what this mortgage insurance thing was. And like at that moment in time, I realized like, well, I don't know what the fuck mortgage insurance is either. So I was like, oh, you know what? I got somebody waiting. I'll call you right back. He's like, yeah, I'm waiting too. I'm signing my loan documents to buy this house. I'm like, yeah, give me 10 minutes. I'll call you back. And I'll never forget, immediately rushing to Google, FHA mortgage insurance. Luckily, it linked me to an article that linked me to a Wells Fargo like explanation infograph video. It was probably on YouTube in the early days of YouTube. And I watched like a 7-minute video on mortgage insurance. And I was like, oh my God, this guy's having like $10,000 added to his loan amount in FHA mortgage insurance premiums. And he's going to pay, I don't know what it is, $340 extra a month for mortgage insurance because he put low money down. So I've got to call him back, and I've got to instill confidence. One, because I really need the money to close that deal. And two, because I happen to know the characteristics of the house, where it was, and I knew he was getting a smoking deal on the house. And this was a smoking deal on the house in like 2000 and whatever it was, 2010, 2011, when property values were just starting to rebound. I'm like, I've got to convince this guy that this is the right thing for him to do. I need to make my money. I need to not look like an idiot. So I took my 7-minute crash course on mortgage insurance that I watched on the Wells Fargo website or whatever. I called him back. I came up with some song and dance about like, oh yeah, you know, I'm pretty sure we talked about that. It was in your initial disclosures. No problem. It's just a premium that you pay because of the right to have an FHA loan. You know, FHA, the government, they're pretty much the only one lending money right now because all the other lenders went bankrupt. I worked at one, WAMU, ha 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 ha. He was like, yeah, I used to bank at WAMU. You know, turned the conversation very friendly, instilled confidence, got him to sign his loan documents, made the commission. And I think that was the first deal that I closed with this guy, Matt, who ended up becoming a referral source for years before he moved to San Francisco and went into a different industry. And like I closed that deal and I was like, holy shit, I don't even know what I don't know. Like I've been doing this for 11 years and I don't know what I don't know. I've got so much to learn. I think I stayed up all night that night watching YouTube videos and videos on the Wells Fargo home buyer portal and like anything I can get my hands on. And so that was just a crazy scenario because I had no clue what I was doing. And here I am today in 2009 making fun of people when I'm like, these guys don't know what they're doing and they're dealing with the biggest financial decision a client is ever going to make. And I'm like, well, I did the same thing.
Yeah.
Funny story. I remember now that loan was $600,000 because 2 years later his job transferred him and he sold that house for like $760,000. So he did very well in 2013, 14, 15, whenever he sold that house. And so I'm very proud of that moment that I like kept my cool, learned something I didn't know. It was still actually the right decision for the client because he needed to have a house, and FHA was the only game in town for low money down programs. And you know, he ended up making a lot of money, like a 20% return on the house, which was really like 3.5% down on 600,000, 20,000, made 140,000 2 years later. You know, he made like a 700% return on his investment. So all's well that ends well, but that was pretty crazy.
That's funny. So I know that recruiting in the mortgage world is just ripe with crazy shit going on. What is the like craziest recruiting thing you've ever seen or been a part of?
Well, I've had a fair amount of people say that they're going to come work for us and then just never show up. I always say, you know, nobody is working with us until they're there, they've signed onto their computer, they've submitted their first loan, and their first loan closes. So we've even got some guys right now that have started. I'm like, well, until they close the first loan, I'm not really counting on them being team members. Because the industry is pretty crazy. You know, changing companies is very scary. When people do decide to change companies, they get recruited by everybody under the sun. And frankly, I just refuse to lie to people. And so I'm going to tell them how tough this job is. You know, I'm going to tell them upfront about the shortcomings of our company. I'm going to tell them what myself and my business partner, Justin, do well as leaders and what we don't do well as leaders. And a lot of times we lose out on recruits simply because, you know, we're telling people the truth. And a lot of times we have people leave us, you know, from working with us to go work for other people because they get told what they want to hear and we tell them the truth. So that's kind of crazy to me, like how many people end up somewhere that's probably not their best fit just because they heard what they wanted to hear. So that's nuts. And then, you know, with recruiting, I'm always shocked how many new companies are coming into the market. You know, I get recruiting calls all the time, and I'm just like, what is the name of your company? What are you guys doing? What is your value proposition? And they all just lead with, money and how big our payout is and how low the rates are. And I'm like, okay, well, let's talk about the other stuff. It's funny to me. It's funny to me and infuriating and drives me batshit crazy and makes me laugh that loan officers will turn around to a realtor or a client with a straight face and say, I am more valuable than just the rock bottom interest rate. I am more valuable as a financial professional, other than like, you're going to get the absolute lowest rate, and the rate that they quoted you over there is 1/8% lower, and you're going to save $30 a month. And they will look at realtors and clients with a straight face and say these things because I do think they believe it and it's true. But then when it comes to the recruiting, they'll turn around, they'll be like, wait a minute, this company will pay me 120 bips instead of 110 bips. I'm not going to ask any more questions. I'm all in. And I'm like, well, wait a minute. You just explained to these people why like a couple extra bucks is not worth it. Like there's some professionalism there. But then when you're getting recruited, you just go for the couple extra bucks. Like, are you fucking insane? And that just always blows my mind. And it's probably the reason I will gladly be a coach, and I will be more than happy to expand my influence and go from coaching hundreds of people to maybe thousands of people. Maybe one day I'll get a gig as like the in-house national coach for a company, but I don't think I'll ever be the in-house, national division leader or national sales manager or national regional manager or whatever. Because I think past the people that we can affect in our branch and the people that we manage very locally, I don't think I'll ever have it in me to put up with that bullshit of like, hey, loan officer, you're telling these people $10 don't matter, but you won't come to company A over company B because of $10, even though maybe we have a better platform for you. I just don't have time for that kind of bullshit. So I want to coach people who want to be coached. I don't want to recruit people who want to be told what they want to hear.
What do you think is the most important attribute of a loan officer?
What is the most important attribute of a loan officer? This is how I know I've been talking too much. I can't even keep my cigar lit. The most important attribute of a loan officer, and I'm going to reference one of your favorite books, Mike, is the book Anti-Fragile. And the concept of the book Anti-Fragile is that there is no word in the English language that means exactly the opposite of fragile. You and I have talked about this endlessly, that durable is pretty close to anti-fragile. There's a couple words that are pretty close to fragile, but when you describe something fragile, there's not really a polar opposite. So this guy wrote this book called Anti-Fragile. And I think the best quality that a loan officer can have is being anti-fragile. They've got to be able to take the rejection, take their lumps, know that they're going to screw up a deal, and they've got to have the intestinal fortitude and the anti-fragileness to make the tough phone call and admit when they screwed up. They've got to have that stick-to-itiveness, if that's even a word. They have to have the resiliency. I think part of that anti-fragile plays into that ability to instill confidence in the client and the realtor of like, hey, we might not have all the answers, but I know how to ask the right questions and I know how to get this deal done. So all the things that kind of relate to that anti-fragileness, and just being able to keep persevering, right? And like move that mountain one rock at a time, which can be really frustrating. I think that's the best skill a loan officer can have for longevity in this business. Because every year or every couple years, there's somebody who grows a massive business, catches lightning in a bottle, was doing the right type of refinances at the right time, or partnered up with the right relocation company or foreclosure company, got all this business and shoots to like the top of the leaderboard. But those people that are doing big numbers, 150, 200, 300 million, they rarely stay on that board for a long time. Because it's hard to stay resilient for that long. It's hard to trap that lightning in a bottle and repeat that. And it's hard, frankly, to just work that hard for that long. So I think that just the consistent grind and being able to put up with that and not lose your way, I think that's part of it. I think that's a big part of it.
What's something that you learned early on that is still serving you to this day? So what's like a good lesson that you've stuck with?
So I'm gonna go way back in a couple of lessons that that have stuck with me. One of the lessons is just like my father's work ethic. My dad, the whole time I was growing up, was like the hardest working dude I knew. Maybe to a bit of a detriment to his personal life or to his health for sure. But just my dad was like a relentless hard worker. George Carlin has this old joke where he used to talk about, yeah, my buddy Bill just worked really hard and I had to give his eulogy and I didn't really know what to say. So I was just like, Bill, that guy was a bill-paying son of a bitch. You gave that guy a bill, he paid his bills. Like, he just found a way to work really hard and always pay his bills. And it's goofy, and I don't want to belittle my dad's influence on me to something, to a George Carlin joke. But my dad's work ethic was insane. I wish he would have found early on in his life a fully commissioned job or a job with more upside, because he took a salary job, a middle management job, and he really worked his ass off at an insane level for a company that at the end of the day didn't really care about him. And I know for sure, had my dad been exposed to real estate or mortgages or insurance sales or something where there was kind of unlimited upside and worked that hard, I know he'd be a multimillionaire and probably healthier and wealthier than he is today. So one of the things I learned very on was work ethic from my dad. And then in my high school years and my Army years and my first few years out of the Army, when I was probably partying way too much, I just learned that I wasn't going to be the best looking guy in the room. I definitely wasn't going to be the wealthiest guy in the room, but I was definitely the guy that would talk to every girl in the room. And so, the rejection of getting shot down by a majority of the girls at the club or a majority of the girls at the bar or the majority of the girls at the party, it's a real lesson in like how to take rejection. But then every once in a while you meet a real pretty one that wants to talk to you. And it's kind of the same thing in the mortgage world. You got to kiss a lot of frogs to find a prince. You got to talk to a lot of girls to find a date. And you got to talk to a lot of top producers in order to build a relationship where one of them becomes a strong referral source. And there's that line in Moneyball where they're all sitting around the table. I'm going to offend some people at this point, so I apologize. There's that scene in Moneyball where they're all sitting around the table, and Brad Pitt's character and Jonah Hill's character is trying to explain to everybody why they should be a statistical-driven baseball club. And the one like old school fat pitching coach goes, "Oh yeah, no, we can't trade for Bill. Bill's a closing pitcher and he dates fat girls." Yeah. And they're looking and they're like, "What?" They're like, "Well, if he doesn't even have enough confidence to go after attractive girls, we can't have him as our closing pitcher." And Jonah Hill's like, yeah, but the numbers, the numbers. And I think about that all the time, and we make jokes all the time that, like, if you meet a guy who's comfortable just going up and striking a conversation with a gal at a bar, or you meet a girl who's comfortable walking into a location and she owns that location and she doesn't mind talking to anybody because she's comfortable with herself, those are the type of people that have the emotional intelligence, the stick-to-itiveness, and the ability to strike up conversation. I'm like, oh, those guys are probably going to make it in the mortgage industry because our business is just talking to people. Like, our whole business is just about talking to people and then turning around and doing the technical work of closing the loan. So I always think of those things. And then early on in my career, something I learned that's really served me well is that, Washington Mutual had this thesis. I mentioned it earlier in our interview here, that they wanted you to be able to do everything. So if you were the new accounts guy, you couldn't just be the new accounts guy. You needed to know how to pull a mortgage application, talk to them about rolling over their IRA, go let them into their safe deposit box, remind them that they had to open a CD. So that cross-training that Washington Mutual provided us to where, like, I know what the IRA income limits are. I know what you can and cannot do with a 401k. I know what you can and cannot do with your business income. I know what you should be doing with your investments and your budgeting. Like, that cross-training has served me at a level that's just insane. And it's really made me the mortgage professional that I am today versus like having to work at a call center and just being an order taker and hope that I can squeeze a couple loans into this small box. Having that cross training at Washington Mutual it really let me understand how to open up that box wider and value somebody's overall financial situation so I can hopefully get them a loan.
What's a story you wish you could tell more people?
The story I wish I could tell more people, and I can't figure out how to tell this story without feeling boastful or egotistical or making it sound like I'm using somebody else's hard work to promote the coaching. But I'll tell that story anyway, is I know a couple dozen people who have been through our coaching program who have truly changed their life for the better. And I don't even like using their names here because to me it just feels disingenuous. You know, I'll use the Stanford MBA program, and then I'll make fun of one of our competitors, and then I'll close with the story I wish I could tell. You know, to get into the Stanford MBA program or the Harvard MBA program, you more or less already have to have amazing grades, amazing life experience, probably have some money if you went to those schools, or be really well connected, or be just like that 1 in a million who came from poverty, made your way through a major university with perfect grades, got a great job, and then applied for, you know, Harvard or Stanford MBA program. And what these MBA programs do is they cherry pick the best of the best of the best. They charge people $100,000 for some additional education, where they put them in the room with other people who are already going to be highly successful, highly connected, high income earners. And then they get out of that MBA program and they go do great things. And Stanford and Harvard and all these other big MBA programs hold them up and say, see, they went through our MBA program, they're really successful. And it's like, those people were already going to be very successful, you know? It's like you cherry-picked Olympic athletes and then say, look how strong we made these people. It's like, no, they were already strong. Like, maybe you got them from a bronze medal to a gold medal, and there's a lot of value in that, but that person was already going to win a gold medal, that person was already going to win a bronze medal. Like, that person was already world-class, the third best in the entire world at this thing. And yeah, if you got them from bronze to gold, that's an amazing skill set, and that's coaching worth paying for, and that's an MBA program worth paying for. But let's not pretend that you took Mike Eaton or Scott Groves, took us off the couch, and turned us into a, you know, bronze medalist in the 500-meter dash. Like, that's just not what they did. And so one of my complaints about about one of our biggest competitors, or they probably don't even look at me as a competitor because we're so small, but the big coaching program in the mortgage space, you know, they do this same thing. They pool thousands of loan officers into a $300 a month program. Those people filter out, you know, the failures. And then the people that make it in the $300 program, who were probably already going to be successful anyway, they start charging them $1,000, and then they start charging them $2,500 a month. And I think now they're up to like $3,000 a month to private coach with this group. And they say, look, these people pay $3,000 a month. They're successful because of us. It's like, well, no, they were probably already going to be successful anyway. And the reality is you got to filter out all the losers in your $300 stage or your $1,000 stage or whatever before you even got them to the stage where they're top producers. So it's like you're really cherry picking the best of the best of the best that you have hand selected to give you money to then hold them up and say, look, we trained the best and they became the best because of us. It's like, well, I don't really agree with that thesis. And so the story that I would like to tell, but I haven't figured out how to craft this story without outing certain people or disclosing personal information about certain people or just sounding overly boastful or, you know, like I'm just trying to come up with a marketing pitch. But the story I'd like to tell is that we have interacted and we have coached and we have provided a plethora of information and some accountability to people that were doing 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 loans a month, and we've gotten them to 5 or 6 or 7 or 10 loans a month. And that biggest incremental life change happens when you can go from making $50,000 or $60,000 a year to $250,000 a year. the way that our industry is set up, the way tax policy in America is set up, the way that kind of living expenses and kind of this raising expectation of lifestyle works in America, the incremental difference between going from 250,000 to 350,000, or even people I know that have gone from $500,000 to $1 million a year in income, they haven't seen their lifestyle or their value or their net worth increase all that much. Yeah, it's gone up. I don't want people to start posting, all the cherry picking, all the anecdotal stories where people have just crushed it in life. But the place where I really know we have value and where we are actually changing people's lives are those ones that are going from $50,000 to $100,000 a year to $250,000 a year. And that's the story I want to tell, is that I'm really focused on those people, and our coaching program really helps those people actually change their lives. And so, I kind of like that Gary Vee thing of like, I'll probably gauge my success by how many people show up to my funeral. I'll probably gauge my success by how many people at some point in the future come out of the woodwork and be like, hey man, it was my hard work. This is the person talking. It was my hard work. It was my commitment to making the calls. It was, my anti-fragileness and stick-to-itiveness that made these things happen. But hey, Scott, thanks for the information that you gave us. Thanks for the ideas that you gave me. Thanks for the accountability you gave me, because it really did help change my life and put me on this trajectory for success. That's probably the story I would like to tell more.
Do you want to close out any kind of like thanks for watching? You kind of started with like, hey, we're going to talk about some stuff, so
Yeah, man. If you got this far, if you're, 2 hours into this podcast or video or wherever maybe you were consuming this information, I hope I added some value. I hope I gave you some interesting information about my life, where I'm coming from, where the market might be going. I hope you got some good information about how to positively affect your business. I hope you didn't get the feeling that this was just a 2-hour commercial for Consolidated Coaching. But that being said, like all good salespeople, we need to end the call with the call to action. So if you're looking to, better yourself, better your business, find a way to commit to lead generation because you think that's going to be the catalyst for all of these other business changes and personal development and business development, then, buy a copy of my book, shoot me an email at Scott@Consolidated Coaching, or sign up for our monthly coaching. By this time this comes out, it might still be $89 a month. Maybe it'll be $129 a month. But I promise that any dollar you spend with us will be returned to you in spades. So thank you for watching, and thanks for being part of this conversation. And thank you, Mike Eaton, for the great interview questions. And we'll talk soon.